Good evening. Welcome to the regular select board meeting for December 20th, 2022. The board will be entering into executive session and reconvening in open session at 5:45. I will be asking members to approve this, entering into executive session for the purpose of considering the value of an interest in real estate at the property known as 10 Brookline Place, where the chair has determined that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the select board, and the chair declares. All those in favor? Bernard? I think that's an aye. Just press the space button and hold it down. Great. John?
Aye.
Miriam?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. For everyone who is not involved in the executive session, we need you to leave the meeting because we will be locking it. And you can rejoin the meeting at 5:45.
At this time, we still have
welcome back. Sorry for being a little late. We will go right into news announcements and updates. I have one. I just want to thank Senator Cindy Cream for her work at getting us 2 earmarks in the Economic Development Bill. One was for $100,000 for Brookline EV charging stations, and the other one was also for $100,000 for stencil, template, and pavement markings for dedicated bike lanes and share the road symbols. Any other announcements, Bernard? And then Miriam?
I'm sorry. Yes, thank you. I just want to remind people of the upcoming Martin Luther King Jr. celebration event live at the Coolidge Corner Theater on January 16. We have a really great program with Pulitzer Prize winning historian Edward Larson, author of a new book, which will be coming out on the 16th. Matter of fact, we will be talking about it before anyone else. It's called American Inheritance, Liberty and Slavery in the Birth of a Nation, 1765 to 1795. And our program is going to be, focusing on the various voices, or what we're calling conflicting voices, of liberty and slavery in that period. Both the sort of founding father type voices, as well as the both enslaved as well as free Black voices. And there are different perspectives on what liberty means, and even what slavery means. So we're also going to have a performance by Reggie Gibson, who everyone knows and loves, Jennifer Barber, our poet laureate, and a singing group, a Joyful Voice of Inspiration. And the admission is free, but you need to buy tickets. And you can go to coolidge.org/MLK. And by the way, the Globe this morning ran a story on the event that you may want to look for that gives us great publicity and credibility to our town. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Bernard. Is it in person?
Yes, live in person. Okay. And by the way, we may be, it's not clear that we're going to be able to live stream it. There's some technical issues that we haven't figured out yet, but it will definitely be available on the YouTube channel after the event.
Great, thank you. Miriam?
Yeah, I just want to let everybody know that there is a flu clinic tomorrow from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the Health Department building on 11 Pierce Street, second floor. It's a walk-in, so just show up, ages 5 to 64. Please bring your insurance card. I say it every week. I'll say it this week. Please, for the love of all things, get your flu shot. Thank you.
I got my flu shot, and I heard your announcement in my head. They were like, do you want your flu shot today? And I'm like, I do. I have to tell Miriam I got it.
I got mine too.
Yay!
All caught up.
Any other announcements before we move into public comment? Seeing none. John, take it away.
All right. Public comment is an opportunity for us to hear the public's perspective on the issues in Brookline that matter. We do have a few rules. Each person speaking tonight limited to 3 minutes. You don't have to use the entire time, but you may, if you like. Please refrain from personal attacks and from addressing personnel issues. Members of the public sometimes raise questions. We may be able to provide a quick answer, but are more likely to work with staff to get a more thorough answer and respond over email. And we'll let you know when you have 30 seconds remaining and when your time is up. Please conclude your remarks at that time. If you have more to say, you're welcome to send an email to board members expressing your thoughts in greater detail. Devin, who's first on the list?
The first person signed up for public comment is Todd Crane. Todd, you've been promoted to a panelist. You can unmute and your time will begin.
Thank you, Devin, and thank you for the board. Barring any unforeseen circumstances, this will be my last time before you as the transportation administrator for the town of Brookline. I wanted to take a minute to thank the board, and through you, past board members from Bobby Allen to Joe Geller, Jesse Mermel to Ken Goldstein, Neil Wyszynski, Raul Fernandez, and everyone in between, for your support of me personally and professionally over the last 17 years as we sought to transform the transportation system in Brookline. Together with the Transportation Board, their advisory committees, advocates, staff from other departments, and this board, we have successfully implemented policies and projects to create a multimodal transportation network that prioritizes healthy and sustainable transportation modes such as walking, biking, micromobility, and public transit over single occupant vehicles. I want to thank you for the trust that you've put in me and make one last request of you. There's still a lot of great work to be done in Brookline, and I hope that you will support Director Rob King, my predecessor, whoever that may be, and the team that I built in the Transportation Division as they seek to continue the work we have started, just as you have supported me over the years. With your support, I know that you will be successful, and they will be successful. Finally, as a town meeting member recently said about me upon hearing of my resignation, you can take the townie out of Brookline, but you can't take Brookline out of Todd. So I truly believe that this is goodbye for now and not goodbye forever. Thank you for all of your support over the past 17 years.
Is there anyone else? Because I want to say something to Todd, but I don't want to interrupt public comment.
The
I'll
next
leave it to you, Heather, but Todd is going to be so sorely missed. And I hope that he will at least make a promise to leave time for us to give him a good send-off.
His last day is January 6th, and I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, Todd, I've so enjoyed working with you, even though we bit off more than we could chew with the scooter pilot program.
You had to bring that up.
I know it was an adventure, and there is no one else that that I trust and admire more.
Thank you.
Why don't you speak, Heather? I'm sure Carolyn will approve or agree.
I just did.
Oh,
The
okay.
end.
Sorry.
Carolyn.
And I just wanted to add on behalf of all of the staff from not just, DPW, but from all the departments that you've touched, Todd. You've done such incredible work here. I think the outpouring of support is just reflective of the incredible work that you've done. So thank you in just the brief amount of time I've been here for your diligence, your speediness, your willingness to take on such complex issues with joy, and the joy that you really bring to the work is infectious, right? All of us feel it, and it makes your team and all of us happy to come to work every day to work with people like you. So thank you for everything you've done. Our loss is very much Worcester's gain. I hope you do great things there, and I hope, as you said, you come back to us when you're sick of them. And you can come work with us again.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
The next person signed up for comment is Carolyn Thal. You've been promoted to a panelist, and your time will begin when you're ready.
Thanks, Devin. And if anybody else wants to say anything to Todd, I do not want to stand in the way.
No, we're good.
Unless you'll loop back to it. So huge loss. My name is Carolyn Thal. I'm a resident. I'm a town meeting member in precinct 16. I'd first of all like to acknowledge Chaz for hosting and leading a meeting yesterday with parents who are impacted by the rec department's after school program that is not running so far this fall. Thankfully, I am not one of those impacted parents, but I jumped on the Zoom to try to learn what's going on. And I heard a lot of really desperate people, and it gave me heart palpitations just hearing them. And Chaz listened, and he was compassionate, and he showed up with an action plan. So thank you for that leadership, Chaz, and good luck working towards a resolution there. Childcare is essential. Without childcare, our economy and everything around it falls apart. Brookline is an increasingly expensive town to live in. And if we're going to keep trying to be inclusive to families across any sort of economic range, I think we should be thinking aspirationally about our programs and services and social safety nets, including daytime and after school childcare. I've been hearing a narrative about the need for Brookline to be an equally good place to work as it is to live, because of course that is how we're going to be able to deliver excellent programs and services. Our operations and services are fundamental to the everyday experience of everyone who lives here. So what I'm getting at is I watched with interest most of, not all of, your budget summit last week. I've looked over the materials. And with respect to an operating override, I would love to encourage you to not be afraid to, as Chaz heard me say yesterday, go big or go home. I want us to give the very awesome Kara Bruton the tools and resources and staff that she needs to plan and oversee economic development. So maybe we won't need as many overrides in the future. I want Erin Galantine to be able to keep our public spaces safe, clean, and beautiful. That is meaningful. Ms. Reese in the health department has important work to do. And I would love to see us expand our commitment to municipally sponsored and run childcare. As a resident and taxpayer, I would be very happy to be asked to invest in these areas which offer meaningful returns. I'll note that the higher number for an override that you showed on Thursday, $5 million, is 1/44th the cost of a rebuilt Pierce Elementary School as currently proposed.
You have
So
30
as
seconds.
you are thinking about and analyzing priorities for operations, programs, and human services, again, I hope you will not hold back. Good luck with that work, and thank you.
At this time, there are 23 attendees. No one has used the hand raise or Q&A feature to indicate they'd like to make a comment.
Let me just say how proud and honored I am to work in a community where I would get the opportunity to work with someone like Todd Crane, who is inspirational, and to hear public comments like the ones that Carolyn just said, which is, to invest in our community. Don't be afraid to ask the voters to invest in their community, as opposed to, what are we getting for this amount of money? So I'm just really in awe sometimes, even though I have become fairly cynical. So moments like these really are very special to me. So, Bernard?
Yeah, I also, thank Carolyn for her comments. I hope one comment that she is not misinterpreted. And that is, we can't be looking at, for example, the Pierce project and the projects to be funded by the override as in conflict or in competition. All of them are incredibly important for all the reasons she mentioned with respect to the override. And I know that wasn't her intention, but I just want to make sure that no one misinterprets it. Thank you.
So let's move into miscellaneous. It's actually quite long. Let's start with the meeting minutes from our, I believe, last meeting. Yes, the December 13th, 2022 meeting minutes. Any comments, edits?
I made an edit to a quote from me, so.
Okay, I assume not very substantively changed. Okay. All those in favor of approving the meeting minutes from December 13th, please say aye. Bernard?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Miriam? And the chair votes aye.
Aye, sorry.
Okay.
Doggy accident.
Oh, no. Okay. Well, we'll get through miscellaneous quickly and then take care of that. Okay. So I move approval of accepting a compact grant in the amount of $40,000 from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to be used to update the job descriptions, classification, and pay plan study for employees within the Department of Public Works, and authorize the town administrator to sign the contract and any associated documents to successfully execute the project. I've been waiting for this for a long time, but probably not as long as our employees. Accepting a grant awarded to the Brookline Police Department for the fiscal year 23 training grant from E911 in the amount of $18,979.45 from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I move awarding and executing contract investigation and sewer system rehabilitation design in sub areas NI 12 with Beta Group in the amount of $174,590, approving the contract with Allegiance Fire and Rescue for an Enforcer 1500 GMP pumper in the amount of $734,583. Boy, that must be one heck of a machine. Moving approval of the authorization for hire request for the Network Services Administrator within the Library Services Department. Approving authorization to hire requests for the following positions within the Department of Public Works, Engineering and Transportation Division, Transportation Administrator, T12, Parks and Open Space Division, Gardener Laborer, LN2. Approving authorization to hire request from the Recreation Department for custodian. Question of approving 6 applicants to be hired as student officers for the upcoming Cambridge Police Academy. Kelly Pierce, Paul Cannon, Jordan Berkeley, Janabel Bria, Catherine Irizarry, Benjamin Yoakum. Approving a user fee for power use at publicly accessible charging stations as required by the MOU between GreenSpot and the town of Brookline. Approving the amendment to the feasibility study agreement to revise section 2.2 of the agreement for the John R. Pierce School in the town of Brookline. This amendment extends the term of the town's feasibility study agreement. Accepting a rebate check in the amount of $13,750 from National Grid for heating efficiency measures at the Baker School. Approving a temporary all-alcohol beverage sales license to Caitlin Morale, doing business as the Lars Anderson Auto Museum for a holiday party to be held on January 5th, 2023 from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. at 15 Newton Street, 50 people expected to attend. And finally, approving a temporary all-alcohol beverages non-sales license to Glen Champagne, doing business as the Lars Anderson Auto Museum for a gala celebration to be held on January 7th, 2023 from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. at 15 Newton Street, 50 people expected to attend that event. Bernard.
Yeah, I would just like to say something about 5K because as written, it could be a little confusing. The feasibility study agreement will expire tomorrow, but people should just be aware that we will also get approval by the MSBA board of the project scope and budget agreement and the project scope and budget. So we're moving into the next phase. We had to extend the feasibility study agreement to tomorrow for technical reasons, but that's going to terminate tomorrow and we're going to move into the next phase. So, you know, it could have been a little confusing to people. So that's what's going on.
Okay. Thank you. Any other discussion before I call the roll? Seeing none. Bernard, for your vote?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Miriam?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Moving into our first order on the calendar, an ARPA Act update.
It's actually.
Melissa, is this
Or-
or is Tyler?
So Tyler just needs to get promoted and then he's got the PowerPoint.
Great.
All right. Good evening, select board members. How's everyone
Good
doing?
evening.
All right. So I am here to give everyone a bit of a high-level overview with ARPA, where we're at, just looking back at the last year, and also bear with me as I try to get this slideshow to cooperate with me. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Let us know if you need permission to share.
No, it looks like it's going to let me. All right. Good deal. So I'm Tyler Bolello-Toller. I am the budget analyst and grant administrator here, or I pretty much just go as the ARPA administrator at this point. So we're just going to look back for 2022, just at what we've done with ARPA and just some of the milestones we've achieved, goals, everything else. First, just a quick overview. With ARPA, Brookline has actually gotten 43.9 million. 32.4 of that was actually received from the Treasury that we received in 2 tranches. Both were direct. The other 11.5 million is actually what we have to apply for through Norfolk County. So that is what we have that is available for us to actually approve and spend between now and 2026. So for the year of 2022, looking between what we have spent between CARES continuation, a couple other buckets of money that I've termed the non-competitive, and then the actual round 1 application process, we have approved 27.8 million in ARPA funds. And looking forward into the upcoming years, which would be between 23 and 24, we still are going to have 9.1 million, which is what we're estimating at the moment to be available for round 2. And that's also including an estimate for premium pay, which we are still undergoing review at the moment for employee eligibility. And this is just sort of a quick overview at just sort of the points of time over the last year of spending. So we had the 1.8 million that we approved earlier in the year, which was our effort to actually extend the work that was already funded under CARES. And in this case, this gave us an opportunity to address some of the actual COVID variants we were still dealing with earlier in the year, especially Omicron. So this was one that was funded non-competitively outside of the application process. Looking into April, that is when we approved the 22.4 million for round 1 proposals. And then this just kind of highlights the rest of the spending. So we had the million that was conditionally committed for the federal earmark towards the Beacon Street bridle path. That is a tongue twister a little bit. And then we have the additional CARES continuation, which allows us to continue the rest of the work and also add other pieces on, like Title VI compliance, grant administration, some of the other non-competitive things that are necessary that are eligible under ARPA that will allow us to continue some of this work. And just for the public to be aware, the round 2 application is actually going to begin next month, January 3rd. So the request for proposals will open then. We will close that on Tuesday, February 7th for the following month. So that gives everyone about 35 days for the application period. And I just put a few of these later dates out just to keep this on everyone's radar. So all ARPA funds have to be obligated by December 31st, 2024. So we have to have everything approved and dedicated towards what the money is going to be spent for. And then everything needs to be liquidated in the following 2 years. So I try to put that in front of everyone as much as possible. Looking at round 1, so far we've spent 2.9 million to date, and excitingly, we have actually started to finally execute a lot of these agreements with our subrecipients. And when I say subrecipients, I mean the local nonprofits that we've been working with. And the additional ones that are still outstanding, we're working through a few pieces, either with procurement, timeline, making sure that our agreement is in line with like some of the other federal and state requirements for match. So there's some nuances there that we're addressing, but everything's it's moving forward as is. First, about $1 million in initial payments to the those with the executed agreements. So we're getting underway, which is very exciting finally. And looking forward into next year, as I said, we have the application portal that is opening next month, Tuesday, January 3rd. That'll be open for about 5-6 weeks, closing on February 7th. Following the request for proposal, we will actually have 6 committee meetings where the committee will openly discuss and evaluate the applications. We'll also solicit public input at that time as well. And then we anticipate the select board vote on those proposals on April 11th of next year. And the application, this is another thing I want to just put on the radar for any prospective applicants. The application between round 1 and 2 is going to look different. And that is going to be posted on the ARPA website. That actually is currently on there. But there are modifications to make sure that we're capturing and prioritizing those communities and groups that have been disproportionately impacted. We want to make sure that those are being put at the forefront. And we're walking the other line too of making sure that we're still spending the money within a timely fashion. So we're trying to make sure that we're prioritizing those two pieces the most. And then just for next steps, this is actually the link to the website where those application updates will be available. So for prospective applicants, I would point you here to actually start looking at what those changes are so you can get ready now. So come January 3rd, you will have all the material you need to start putting into the online application. And then just the first meeting following the end of the application period will be on February 17th next year. So yeah, it's kind of quick, high level, but any questions?
Great. Any questions or comments from select board members? Miriam?
I just want to say first a big, huge shout out. Thank you to Tyler and Melissa and Chaz, but really Tyler for just wonderful work. And I have to spend a minute thanking Arthur, Conquest, Jenny Raitt, and Brian Kane, and Mike Salmon for their work on this committee. Very dedicated group of people working really diligently to make sure that we are maintaining our focus. And we literally have outlined our meetings between now and April so that we all know when they are. We have a goal for each meeting. And I think we really learned a lot from the first process that we're bringing into the second phase. So I appreciate that. That's it. Happy to answer
Great.
questions.
John?
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you very much, Tyler, and others, Melissa as well. Just wanted to highlight a couple of things, and you know, for the purpose of making sure I got it right, and I mean I have it straight, and also for the purpose of maybe Tyler or Melissa could address whether this is a cause for concern. The first thing to highlight is that of the 22 million that was approved in the first round, it looks like something less than 3 million is actually out the door at this point. Should we be concerned about that?
No, one, we're working still with some procurement pieces. I think there was a lot of scope changes that folks were addressing as well. And on top of that, a lot of these are broken up over the timeline of the application. So these were not done as lump sums. These are done as initial payments that are going to happen over the series of either a year, 2, 3, 4 years. So that's why that number is lower than what the actual approved amount is, but we're still making sure that we're going to hit that target before we run the risk of any federal rescission with those funds.
Okay, so of the difference between the 2 point whatever and the 22 million, can you give us a breakdown as to how much of that is because of applications that are still, MOUs that are still being processed and haven't been signed yet?
Are you meaning more so just what are the initial payments that haven't gotten out the door with those outstanding agreements?
Yeah. I'm just trying to, you mentioned the sequencing of the payments as being a reason for the number being short. I'm trying to determine how much of the difference between 22 and how much has actually been spent is MOUs that haven't yet been signed.
So some of that, because of these agreements haven't been finalized yet, that number is going to vary because those scheduled payments are something we are negotiating with each individual subrecipient. So some might get a little bit more upfront than others. So that's a little bit of a tricky thing to answer. One thing I did want to note as well is on that website, we're going to try to push to have a better, more accurate tracking system going forward as well. So you'll actually be able to see a better breakdown of these. So maybe that would actually help answer the question as well of who's actually had this much received and what the expenditures are.
Mm-hmm. Okay, if it's okay, just a couple more quick questions, then I'll step aside. Is there any kind of a common theme to, what has been approvable so far, but what hasn't been approvable so far?
I wouldn't say approvable. I think one of the bigger themes is just addressing procurement issues right now. Not even issues per se, but just there's been some nuance with that we've had to tackle, which has been a valuable lesson for us going into the second round as well, so that we can make sure that we're putting all of those compliance pieces, everything with federal and state in front of the subrecipients, town departments, so that they know what to expect ahead of time before we even move forward with the approvals.
If I could just jump in here real quick, it's just for the general edification here, right? When we talk about subrecipient agreements, it's different than, I think a lot of people look at ARPA and they say, hey, we cut someone a check and then we say good luck. But the reality of the situation is these programs that a lot of our nonprofit partners have put in front of us and that you have approved require oversight. There are things where they have to make decisions. It's not just, here's money to cover your operating expenses. It's, I want to create a program that uses ARPA money. And so if that's the case, then it has to follow the ARPA rules. And if it has to follow the ARPA rules, then we, as the people giving them the ARPA money, have to provide oversight of that because we're ultimately responsible if it breaks the ARPA rules. And I think it was, communicating that out to the broader community and then making sure everyone has the understanding that, federal grants have, I wouldn't call them onerous, but just sometimes difficult to understand sort of Byzantine regulations around them. That does kind of pose an initial roadblock, kind of a growing pain to this whole process, is learning. Some organizations, obviously, which receive federal dollars more regularly and are familiar with what's called the Uniform Federal Guidance, they know how to operate in that field, and some people don't. And so making sure everyone is on the same page there has taken time.
Great. I did have that other one that I didn't get to ask yet. Is there any kind of rule of thumb as to whether an applicant from round one whose MOUs have not yet been signed should regard that as an indication of there isn't really the window to apply for round two funding yet if we haven't reached an MOU on round one?
Could you elaborate a little bit?
I'll just say this, John.
Yeah.
Case by case basis, probably. Like, we'd have to better understand the reason for why the MOU has not been executed.
Okay. No.
Yeah, I would echo that. They really do vary quite a bit. Each one kind of has a little bit of nuance to it that the others don't. So,
and this is not uncommon with grant funding. The state does something very similar with a lot of grant programs. It's called technical assistance. They want their subrecipients to be successful, just like we want our subrecipients to be successful. So we coach them, we walk them through the process. It's more about education because it's usually about just straight up ignorance of what is expected or where to find the forms or what needs to be filled out, how often it needs to be disclosed, who needs to be the one disclosing it.
But there's no cutoff date by which MOUs have to be signed.
Well before the 2024 date, but other than that, no.
And I will just say, we have worked very, very closely with town council to make sure that these MOUs are appropriate, that we're, following all the guidelines and the rules. And I think we get the most pressure from actually the organizations themselves who want the MOUs signed.
They want their money.
They do. They want their money.
Yeah.
And I think it's a healthy tension between making sure we're doing it correctly and getting them their money so that they can execute in a way that is what everybody wants to see.
Well, I see Mike Salmon has joined us. Not sure if he is in a space where he can comment on
Yes, yeah,
ARPA.
I'm okay. Just not in a space where where I'd like to have the video on, that's all.
Mhm. Leave it to your imaginations.
I know, his former CIA headquarters.
It's not what you think.
Do you need a vote from us, or was this just an update? Okay,
This was just an update.
great,
And I
thank
think
you.
one last thing, which is we are getting premium pay done. It is happening.
Yes, excellent.
That's it.
Great. Thank you very much for working on this. Any other comments? Okay, Bernard.
Yeah, just one comment. We are still able to send comments and concerns to you with respect to, MOUs are out there. So I just want to make sure that you know that they may be coming. So,
Yes, I am.
okay, of
Make sure that you CC the chairs.
course.
Excellent. Okay. John?
Yeah, thanks. I just remembered one question I forgot to ask. I'm quite certain that the largest of the ARPA grants that was agreed to by the select board in round one was for the Brookline Housing Authority. And I'm just wondering if that one has been completed yet, and if not, if we have a target for, how soon are we going to get that one done?
That one was, oh, Tyler, you want to take that one?
Yes, so we've actually, me, town council, we met with Michael Alperin and the rest of BHA to talk through some of the details. I expect BHA to be one of the only ARPA agreements that will actually have amendments, and that is because there is a state match involved. So we have to make sure we're also meeting those DHCD requirements for state match. So there's a few more nuances with BHAs that we're trying to make sure that we're targeting and getting our agreement aligned with expectations from the state.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Great. So excited to have a second chance to call for applications and projects. Okay.
All right.
Moving along. Thank you so much, Tyler.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Code of conduct. Miriam, do you want to talk a little bit about it, or do you want
Ann,
our Director of Human Resources?
Ann, what do you want to do? I mean, I think we can shoot through
Let
pretty
Miriam
quickly.
take the lead.
Okay,
Okay, before you do, Mike has his hand up.
okay.
Oh, sorry, I don't want to interrupt. I just do have a comment about this Ann, go right ahead, and then Heather, just if you wouldn't mind coming back to me, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, we'll do that.
Me too.
So very quickly, thank you all for your input on last Thursday. Ann and I took all of that input and made, I don't think really too many substantive changes. We did intentionally, shore up some of the language that we talked about. And we also made sure that the first bullet points were kind of framed in the positive. And we moved the kind of the here's what you shouldn't do part down to the bottom, just so it's like you should be this, you should be that, and don't do this. We still kept it pretty short. I mean, pretty much we basically just incorporated all your suggested changes. That's pretty much it. I hope, of course, that this will keep also ad hominem personal attacks at bay, but we tried to do that without really saying here, hey, you shouldn't just attack people or say mean things or talk to staff in demeaning ways. These are rules to live by. And again, still, it's all pretty much MIAA wording. That's it. Ann, anything to add? I know Bernard wants to make a few edits, suggest a few edits. But Ann, do you want to add anything before we get there?
No, I think you've explained it well. I did put up on screen share the actual language. I sort of cut and pasted and left it just so that it's there for review, given that Bernard was looking to make some edits so that all of the folks are able to see the language. And then I can highlight sort of where he's looking to make changes.
Okay, well, let's take Mike Salmon and then Bernard.
Sorry, it took me a little time to get to my the right place here. Okay, so there is one change that there was a comment, I think it was on the TMMA listserv about, some of this is a bit subjective, and so I suggested that we might say the code lays out a two-way street. We expect staff members to respond to residents, and we expect residents we expect staff members to respond to residents, and we expect residents to respect the time constraints faced by staff members. And if that sounds okay, I can put that in the chat. And if you'd like to consider including that, that would be great.
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
So one of the things that Bernard wanted to strike was the bullet point, individuals should treat each other and staff with respect. Bernard, would you be amenable that instead of striking that, we replaced it with the wording Mike just provided?
Sure. And by the way, the reason why I proposed striking that is that I think it's already mentioned, or maybe I added it to the fourth bullet point. So it's not as if I wanted that language out. I just think it's redundant. But yeah, I'm okay with that.
Right. No, sorry. That's how I took it too. I told Heather earlier today, I didn't have any problem with striking that. But, and what I would do is word it to say staff members are expected to respond to residents, and residents are expected to honor the time constraints faced by staff members, so that it's in the same kind of third person rather than first person as the rest.
So we're doing this in the third bullet?
In the second bullet, instead of individuals should treat each other and staff, just change that to say staff members are expected to respond to residents, and residents are expected to respect the time constraints faced by staff members.
It's also in the chat.
Yeah,
Mike
is that okay
provided
with
it.
everybody?
It's fine by me. Everyone else?
All right. Yeah.
It just needs to be put in third person the way Miriam
Yeah.
changed it. Yeah.
Town staff. Thank you.
Great. Any other comments or edits, Bernard?
Yeah, sorry, I'm having trouble with this hand raise function. So a couple things. First of all, someone brought to my attention that we, the select board, are trying to give a code of conduct to, among other places or other bodies, the advisory committee and town meeting, and that's not really appropriate. So one comment I would, or one change I would suggest is to rephrase this as let's see, a code of conduct of the select board for the select board, town staff, and select board appointed boards and commissions. I mean, it's we can ask the advisory committee or town meeting to not act like jerks, but we really don't have any authority over them. That's one thing. The other thing is, I just don't want anyone to think that we're trying to stifle sort of robust conversation and debate. So one of my changes was to add in the first line of the code, promoting robust but civil discourse. And like I said, that is to make sure that no one thinks that we're trying to stifle emotional conversation or tough conversations. We just want to make sure that people are civil and respectful. So.
I might
Miriam?
suggest to
Anne?
have, sorry, I might just suggest to leave it as robust civil discourse and not say but civil discourse.
Sure.
Miriam?
Yeah, that's fine with me. I agree. And what I was gonna say is I don't think I'm not, how do I put this? I don't really want to change the title. I think it should be, I think it's okay for us to, I think there is some role for us to say, this is how employees, boards and commissions should behave. And if they're on the advisory committee and they want to exclude themselves from this, then that's their choice. But I don't think we need to change our wording in order to make them more comfortable with that. But I'd love to hear how other people feel, and maybe I'm misinterpreting what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm not saying, make them more comfortable, but just recognize the fact that, we are the executive and they are the legislative body in terms of town meeting. And, we can urge them to not be jerks, but, we don't really have the authority to say, you shall not. Of course, we're not saying it for anyone, you shall not. We're saying this is this is how we expect people to behave in conversations and debates.
So I have to agree with Miriam. I'm not inclined to change the title either. We don't, assess any fines, right? Like if you're found guilty of violating this, there's not a whole lot that we can do. This is just putting out our expectations. It is unfortunate that we and staff have encountered people that we need to create this document for. So the more that we can set expectations as to how staff is supposed to respond to people who request information, and balance their work priorities, because we are the executive and technically they work for us.
Yeah. No, I have no question. I have no problem with this relating to staff and our boards and commissions. I'm just talking about separate bodies in town government, which is the advisory committee and town meeting.
But neither of those are listed. It says employees, boards, and commissions.
Except that all town elected and appointed officials, volunteers and employees in the first bullet. So maybe we just need to change that.
I'm open to that, but quite honestly, I really think that town meeting members and the advisory committee should try to conduct themselves according to this code of conduct.
If I could just jump in real quick here, I think the other thing that this does that works really well is it's a suggestion and it's a floor, right? It's aspirational rather than prescriptive. It describes the ideal relationship between these bodies, and it's kind of, from a staff perspective, it's our hope that this, where necessary, can be the kind of touchstone for committees or other bodies to set more concrete rules. So, right, town meeting is obviously not bound by this. A town meeting is a separate independent governmental entity, and we respect that authority. But we use this as kind of a suggestion, so that if town meeting decides to implement a code of conduct for itself, beyond the handbook, with that is enforceable or has kind of teeth to it, that this is kind of a good set of guidelines for them, it's a good set of guidelines that the select board thinks could be followed here. Similarly for committees that you appoint, particularly if they deal with hot button topics, or they're going to be labor intensive for the staff that are staffed for them, knowing in advance, hey, there's this general kind of set of guidelines that we should follow. Maybe we should take the time in advance of these difficult projects to develop more detailed guidance for our team and the staff that's going to be helping us, so that everyone is clear from the outset what it is that we are and aren't doing. That's kind of the aim of this. You know, there are no teeth to this code of conduct. It's not enforceable. You know, I'm not going to, you know, if someone does something that I think violates this code of conduct, I don't have the authority to say, hey, there's a punishment to be levied. No. You know, at most, if that person is a committee member or a board member, I might say to you, you know, we've had issues with this person not respecting your code of conduct, and maybe you don't reappoint them. But you know, it's really the beginnings of a conversation rather than a, you know, finger wagging, I think as Miriam said.
So Mike has his hand up.
Honestly, I think we're overthinking this. This is a very gentle reminder for people, both in town employment and on boards and commissions and residents. So all three, not more than both, to be sensible in their dealings and courteous in their dealings with each other. And we're all residents, even if we're members of the advisory committee rather than the select board. And I think what we're saying to all residents, including those who are appointed, is that when you're working with staff or with other boards and commissions, please be reasonable in your expectations.
Bernard, and then I'm going to open this up because it is a public hearing.
Oh, I didn't realize it was a public hearing.
Mhm.
Okay, yeah. Let's see. Look, I mean, I'm not going to fall on my sword on this or whatever the metaphor is. But, you know, think about this in terms of us trying to impose a code of conduct on the school committee. I mean, that's always a touchy issue. And although I think this is sort of a minor point, you know, it is important for us to recognize, you know, the limits of our authority, so that they recognize the limits of their authority, and that everyone understands, understands those limits. And, you know, I think that avoids a lot of problems. But again, I'm not going to go to war on this, because I think that, you know, the heading or the title for employees, boards, and commissions sort of implicitly says what I'm concerned about, and that is we're only talking about select board people or select board appointed boards and commissions.
Okay, this is a public hearing. You can notify Devin that you would like to make a comment. You will have up to 3 minutes.
At this time, there are 56 attendees. I do want to bring board members' attention to the Q&A where someone has asked, how is this proposal to be adopted? Which I believe the town administrator touched on. There was another comment that said it would be helpful if staff were reminded that the open meeting law and public records law must be complied with as they balance their tasks. Those are the two written comments. And at this time, no one has used the hand raise or Q&A feature to indicate they'd like to make a comment.
So the open meeting law is a separate issue that is governed by the Attorney General's office. We do our best to reply timely, which I believe we have 10 days, working days to respond to requests, and town council's office works with the town clerk to respond to those. As far as adopting the code of conduct, it's a select board policy, so we would vote on it. And again, there are no repercussions. It's a gentle reminder not to treat people badly. Like saying, I pay your salary.
That happened to me about twice a year in New York.
Yeah, no, it's real fun when the school committee folks get told that and they're like, what salary?
Miriam? So Nathan Spritz has made a comment in the Q&A. He would like us to strike the opening sentence following the best practices of the Mass Municipal Association, because he thinks we should own the code and not say it's someone else's, but in fact, it is someone else's. It is heavily lifted from the Mass Municipal Association with their blessing. They produced it for places like us to be able to use it So I actually think we have a obligation to note that, but thank you.
I'm with Miriam. Any other comments? Are we ready to vote on this? If there are no other comments from the public, I will close the public hearing. And with the edits that we've talked about here tonight, I will move approval of the code of conduct. All those in favor, Bernard,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Miriam,
Oh, yeah, you betcha I.
Mike,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Thank you very much, Anne, for working with Miriam on this code of conduct. I do hope that it helps us understand how to balance priorities and hopefully talk to one another in a civil and professional manner. Great. So we are a little late, but we are finally at the noise bylaw waiver public hearing that was originally noticed for 6:30. I believe Chestnut Hill Realty has a request of us to consider. Andy Martineau,
Hello, good evening.
good evening.
I think we also want to promote Jennifer Gilbert, Mark Levin, and Ray Matrano as well, Devin, before we get started. Here we go.
Good evening.
Good
I was just
evening.
Spinning in cyberspace. So yeah, let me just make sure that the team from Chestnut Hill Realty is on. So I see Andy, Ray Matrano, and the other person would be Mark Levin, who I see coming on now. Great. So my name is Jennifer DePazzo Gilbert, and I'm here on behalf of Chestnut Hill Realty on this request for a waiver from the town's noise bylaw, sometimes referred to as a special permit when conditions are imposed. This is relative to the 40B project that's currently underway at Puddingstone, located on Sherman Road, which is on the Boston line. Here with me this evening, again, is Mark Levin, Andy Martineau, and also Ray Matrano. Ray is from Waypoint, the project representative. Specifically, this request seeks a special permit to allow for concrete pours to occur and be sequenced and timed so as to both keep this project on schedule and so that the concrete can properly cure to ensure the structural integrity of the building. More details on that in a minute. You should have received 3 letters in support of this request. Arguably, those letters came from the several most impacted tenants at 238 and 222 Jerry Road, and also one on Sherman Road. I did see some letters in opposition that were shared with me, but several of them were anonymous, so it's impossible to tell if those folks are impacted or even near this particular building, again, which is located on Sherman Road. When the team at Chestnut Hill Realty became aware that in order to avoid significant delays to the schedule and protect the integrity of the concrete would require this timing and sequencing, they immediately reached out to the town's building commissioner and the town construction liaison. They met and discussed what would be required from the town. The town building commissioner told Chestnut Hill Realty they would have to apply for a waiver or a special permit under the noise bylaw. And the project team then also provided the town with all of the reports and engineering information that was requested by the town in advance of this hearing. You should have also received in your packet a letter from the town's construction liaison noting that to allow this request will decrease construction time and lessen the hours of active construction. It also notes that this type of construction takes place throughout the Boston area and nationally. In fact, it's my understanding that waivers like this have been granted to keep some of Brookline's school projects on schedule as well. Finally, the letter from the town's project representative recommends 8 conditions to mitigate the impacts of this request. We've reviewed those in detail, and are amenable to implementing all 8 of them. The benefits to granting this request are connected to avoiding significant delays to the project schedule so that the construction can be completed in a timely and safe manner. The importance of getting these units online and available to renters shouldn't come as any surprise. There are 250 units proposed, and 50 of these will be affordable, and the need for these units is great, as I'm sure you're aware. But also the schedule is important to keep these 250 units on the town's housing inventory, or SHI. It's estimated that if this waiver is not granted for these 7 construction pours, it will add at least 8 to 10 months to the construction schedule. This would mean that those units would fall off of the SHI. And it's my understanding that there are other variables at play, like the census data that is due out to be released in May of 23, and then the status of some other 40B projects that might be delayed as well. Now, let me turn it over to Andy Martineau for some more technical details and information about the specific project and request, and then we'll all be available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. Thank you to the board for meeting with us this evening. I'm going to go ahead and start just by giving a quick sort of background update on where we are with the overall construction at Hancock Village, with the hopes of providing the board with some additional context for our requests and kind of where Pudding Stone falls in the sequencing of construction at Hancock Village. I'll go ahead and share my screen. So this is the entirety of the Hancock Village property. You have Independence Drive here just to orient you, running north to south. As the board is aware, we started construction and recently completed construction of Residents of South Brookline project 40B, which included the infill buildings, as they were often referred to, dotting the northern property line on the east or west side respectively. So these 11 buildings here are complete. We've recently completed construction of the Asheville building, and we're going through final inspections for one of 2 new recycling centers, which is located here just off of Asheville Road. We've also wrapped up, or nearly wrapped up, construction of a new state-of-the-art community center for the residents of South Brookline. An additional recycle center opened last month and has been in use since that time. And we completed construction of the Jerry building on Jerry Road here over the summer, and that's now occupied fully. Which brings us to Pudding Stone, which is located here, as Jennifer said, on the southwest corner of the site, down on the Boston line, far removed from our abutters. Pudding Stone represents the culmination of a multi-year effort to improve Hancock Village via all these construction projects. Pudding Stone, as Jennifer said, includes 250 units, 50 of which will be affordable. So when all is said and done here at Hancock Village, will have created a number of much needed housing for Brookline, and a total of 90 units between all of the projects. So that's just kind of where we are construction wise. And a note on construction, nobody on our team, nobody at Chestnut Realty has pretended for a moment that construction at Hancock Village hasn't been disruptive. We recognize that, we're sensitive to that, and we've made every effort that we can to accommodate requests from our residents and abutters alike to mitigate those impacts. As it relates to our request for Pudding Stone tonight, that's exactly why we're here. And that's really at the heart of the request. Aside from building quality projects, our priority for all of these projects, and this is the way we've sequenced them, the way we have, the way that we've designed Pudding Stone, the way we have, is to complete the projects as quickly and safely as possible. And so that's really the heart of the request. And I'm hoping the board will focus on that request specifically for Pudding Stone. So we're requesting the waiver from the board, as Jennifer said, for 7 concrete pours, which would occur over a 6-month period, non-consecutively, and to do so during revised construction hours for those instances only, from 4 a.m. to 11 p.m. As Jennifer said, if we're not granted the waiver, the project schedule is effectively delayed by a minimum of 8 to 10 months, which in our mind only prolongs the amount of disturbance that's being incurred by our residents and others impacted by the project. And so it would be problematic for us from a project standpoint, but I think it would also be problematic for our residents, and certainly not to the benefit of the town, for the reasons Jennifer mentioned. As a practical matter, not granting the waiver merely delays the number of concrete trucks that would arrive at the site. Redesigning the project is not really an option for us, and it wouldn't really change the impacts as a result of the trucks arriving on site. So putting stone, we're currently building the foundation and lower levels of the project, which in your memo describes that as a post-tension concrete structure. Just a quick primer on that. Post-tension concrete is a structure that requires very timely and precise pours. They're sequenced a certain way, they're designed a certain way, and there isn't any flexibility and certainly no room for error in executing those pours. To date, we've executed a number of smaller concrete pours, about half the size of these larger pours that we're asking relief for. We've been able to execute those pours during the typical construction hours that the town prescribes, but these pours have taken all day. So it became apparent to us during the course of those smaller pours that these upcoming larger pours would not be able to be executed within the allotted construction hours. The reason for that is sort of multi-pronged. One, logistically, it's physically impossible for the concrete trucks to arrive on site at the rate necessary within 90 minutes of the concrete being loaded onto the truck during the prescribed hours of construction. Per regulations for this type of building, concrete needs to be poured within 90 minutes of being loaded onto the truck. Otherwise, you start to get into a scenario where the integrity of the concrete and the usability of the concrete is compromised. And since we've started the project and started this phasing, this concrete phase of the project, if you will, we've found that the trucks are consistently delayed by traffic. You know, they're entering the morning and evening rush hour or afternoon rush hour periods where they're coming from. A limited truck route, which is something that, you know, we set and we try to abide by as best we can. And we've also modified for the purposes of this request. And I have a site plan showing the board, if it's of the interest to the board, what that looks like. But these logistical issues are also further exacerbated by winter conditions. Concrete pours become more challenging in the winter. And so you can imagine the confluence of logistical issues that I just described, along with colder weather, making things very challenging. So as Jennifer said, you know, upon this realization, we approached the building department and the town's Hancock Village construction liaison about how best to proceed, seeking their guidance, which Jennifer covered. So from our perspective, granting the waiver would enable the trucks to arrive on site at the rate that's necessary in order to complete these pours in these 7 instances, which in the scheme of an overall 3-year construction period, of which we're approximately halfway through, we feel like it's in the best interest of our residents and everybody involved in the project to grant the request so we can maintain our schedule and be done with the disruption. We want to be done just as much as everybody else. We understand and we're sensitive to the fact that construction at Hancock Village has been disruptive, as I said before, particularly for our residents that live there. We care about our residents. They're our business. They're our customers. If it weren't for them, we wouldn't have Hancock Village. And we think the plan that we've advanced represents our best effort to devise a plan that comes up that will mitigate the potential disruption and impacts during these limited occurrences where the larger pours would take place. And working with the building department and the construction liaison, we've incorporated their suggestions for additional mitigation, which I believe is reflected in Mr. Yanovich's memo. As Jennifer said, the necessity of working outside of typical construction hours is not unique to Brookline. It's not unique to this project. It happens all the time. And believe me, if there was a way for us to do things differently, if we could break up these larger pours into smaller pours without disrupting significantly the construction schedule by a minimum of 8 to 10 months, we would do that. But it's just not possible. The amount of work required to go back and redesign the project, and the time that that would take then ripples through the rest of the project schedule. You can imagine the contractors and subcontractors that are lined up in sequence in anticipation of these concrete pours being completed on a certain timeline. The ripple effects are significant. So that's the high points of the request, kind of the story of how we've gotten to this point. And I'll close by saying that in addition to the requests for additional mitigation from Mike Yanovich, we're also open to additional suggestions and conditions the board may feel appropriate to further mitigate the potential impacts of working during different hours for construction. So happy to entertain any questions the board may have. And I have Mark Lev and Jennifer and Ray Matrano here as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Andy. I've got 2 select board members with their hands up, but I'm going to take the first stab. I just want to make sure that my assumption is correct, because that was a lot of information. I had originally heard that it was 7 months, once a week from 2 a.m. to 11 p.m. No? Okay. Can you state the hours and the length again?
Sure. So it's 7 pours over the course of 6 months. It would be 1 pour per month. Each month, except for April, there would be 2 pours. So you have 1 pour in January, 1 pour in February, 1 pour in March, 2 in April, 1 in May, 1 in June.
And what were the hour waiver for?
It would be 4 a.m. to 11 p.m. workday. And I have a timeline, if it's helpful for the board to kind of understand what a day in the life of extended work hours might look like. But it would be front loaded with trucks arriving to the site to load up the concrete pump, which pours the concrete onto the slab of the building. And then towards the early evening hours, that work would be complete. And then we'd be doing, I think it's called quiet work in the memo, but basically concrete finish work, spreading it out, evening it out, making sure it's set and curing appropriately. And then obviously making sure that our winter condition work accommodations are in place and functioning.
And forgive me for the second question. So I assume that the construction schedule anticipated that you'd be pouring concrete in a New England winter. So it's just the surprise at how long the other concrete was taking.
Yeah, so it's a approximately 3-year construction schedule. And so we were always going to be encountering cold weather conditions. That's not something that we didn't account for in our schedule. What was not forecasted for is the logistical challenges of getting the trucks to the site with limited construction hours, limited truck route, and just them encountering traffic. So it's for these 7 instances, it's clearly going to be very challenging, if not impossible, based on our experience with the smaller pours, which again have been about half the size of these larger pours, which those smaller pours have taken the entirety of the current workday. It became clear to us that we're going to need more time, not only to pour the concrete, but to make sure that it's spread evenly and that the finish work can take place so the concrete achieves the required strength and uniformity and the like. So we always knew we'd be working in winter conditions. We didn't know that the logistics of these specific pours would be so dramatic from the others.
Okay, thank you. Bernard.
Yeah, a couple questions to get a sense of the impact on Brookline residents. I didn't see in the materials where the trucks will be loaded with concrete, and then what roads they'll be using to get to Hancock Village, and whether any of those roads are in Brookline.
Yes, so I have 2 plans that I can show you to answer both of those questions. The concrete's not loaded at the site. The concrete is loaded at the concrete plant. We're using 2 concrete providers. So the trucks.
That was my question. Where is
Yeah, so one of them is Boston Sand and Gravel, which I think everybody's driven by that on 93. And I'm blanking on the name of the other. Perhaps Ray could chime in. I think they're out of Walpole. So we have 2 concrete providers that will be using the same truck route. So obviously, by the virtue of the site being in Brookline, some of the roads that are being used will be in Brookline. I'll go ahead and share my screen so I can show you the truck route. just need to get the Zoom menu out of the way. Here it is. So currently, per our approved CMP, the truck route is this, which the trucks come in off of Route 9 and then make their way, taking a right by the reservoir and then coming down Lee and Clyde Street through Putterham, and then ultimately Independence Drive to access the site. This is one of the routes that are in our approved CMP. The other alternate route, which we try not to use ever, unless it's just not possible to use this route. This was something that was at the request of the building department and everybody else involved in reviewing our CMP way back when we were starting construction. Hancock Village includes Beverly Road. We've explicitly excluded Beverly Road from this alternate truck route plan for these 7 pours, knowing that that wouldn't be tenable to the board or our neighbors, and certainly not something that we would want to propose, having concrete trucks coming down Beverly Road at early hours in the morning. That's not something that was tenable to us, and we've already given direction to our contractors, and will continue, if the waiver is granted, to reiterate that. Another consideration is having a police detail to further limit the possibility of a truck coming down Beverly Road. So that's the truck route.
Right. So I guess the question is, at what point are we going to run into noise problems? I mean, I assume that while they're driving through, I forgot the street that, around the country club, for example, that's just a truck, driving on the roads. And the noise problem is going to be when it gets to the site. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the majority of the noise will be generated by the concrete pumps. So I'll go ahead and pull up the site logistics plan. There we go. And so this is similar site plan to what I showed you at the beginning, but at a different scale. So again, the Pudding Stone project is here. You have Sherman Road coming in off of Independence. You have Hancock Village Drive, which is the newly completed or nearly completed road that was built in conjunction with the Jerry Building and Community Center projects. So the concrete trucks will come in off of Independence Drive, and we'll load the concrete at, depending on which pour is taking place. There'll be a concrete pump situated in this location generally on this northern side of Pudding Stone. And then for some of the pumps, some of the pours rather, there'll be a pump located on the southern edge of the building. Again, just depending on which pour is happening on one of the 7 dates. One of the mitigating factors that the construction liaison recommended, and one that we'll gladly implement, is enclosing the pump with sound dampening mats. This is a technique we've used throughout construction with some success. It helps dampen the amount of sound emanating from the pumps. So this would be the most, the loudest portion of the pour. But again, this is noise that would take place otherwise. So it's different hours. The trucks themselves, that's I would hazard that's akin to white noise, consistent with typical traffic and trucks circulating. So this would be the more noisy aspect of the proposal.
Bernard, are those
That's
all
fine.
of your questions?
Yeah, that
Okay.
clarified for me.
Mike?
Okay, so I want to start by just saying that I had a very interesting experience when I was living on Beacon Street. I once at 2 o'clock in the morning or 2:30 in the morning sat down on the bucket of an MBTA front end loader that was actually violating the noise bylaw by working at 2:30, and it was the backup horn that got me out of bed, dressed, and down there at 2:30 in the morning. And so I'm going to be asking some questions about backup horns. But I do have some other concerns. You've got a pour that is going to take hours, presumably. You've got 70 trucks, and they have to be lined up in some sort of sequence so that the concrete goes in. I appreciate the 90-minute limitation, But it strikes me that there's going to be a long queue. And one question I have is that queue going to back up onto Independence Drive during sort of normal hours after 4 o'clock? And the other thing is, you've said that, you've explained that the last bit of work, the one part that goes to 11 p.m. is spreading and so forth. And the sense that I have of the noise and activity that takes place during that, I could be wrong, but the sense that I have is that by then the vehicles are gone, there are no backup horns. And so I'm wondering why you don't want to start at 7 a.m. And go to 2 a.m. and have that work done at what I perceive, and you're welcome to correct me, please do, what I perceive to be the quieter part of the work done in the wee hours of the morning. So those are my sort of two concerns, is about backup horns and whether there's shifting the schedule in some way during the day might make it easier for residents.
Sure. I'll try and answer both questions, and I might ask you, Ray, to help me on that second one. So in terms of where the trucks would be queuing, and again, I'll pull up site plan here.
Well, it's where they're queuing is certainly of interest, but I'm much more interested in, are they going to be, when they come in, it strikes me as being it'd be very surprising if they park perfectly, that they don't have to back up and jockey for position and so forth. And an intermittent backup horn sure as hell is not white noise. And not at 4 in the morning.
Yeah.
So I want to make that point, that is my primary concern.
Yeah, I wasn't insinuating that there would be no trucks backing up or that, backup horn is, akin to white noise. I was referencing.
I know you weren't. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll share my plan. And just a note on the backup horns, they're an OSHA requirement. It's not something that we can't not have, or the contractors can't not have. It's, not something that they would just go ahead and unplug. That wouldn't be safe or advisable, and not something we would consider, and certainly something that the building department and the construction liaison have reminded us that, that's a no-no. To your question about queuing, and I think I'll use
Andy, I can help you out with that too. So the queuing, we can show the queuing map, but ideally the trucks will be doing minimal. They'll be driving through as opposed to doing a lot of backing in and backing out. We will be queuing a majority of the trucks within Hancock Village Drive, which is that new construction access road, where a majority of the pumping will be done from, internalized basically.
So trucks. Yeah, so this is Hancock Village Drive, which Ray just referenced, where trucks will be queuing. And then to the extent that trucks arrive on site in the earlier hours, the plan would be to have them queue and utilize the shopping center parking lot away from residents, away from abutters. And so if there was a cause for a truck to have to wait for a time before they could enter the site, this would be the location where that would occur.
But there's a limited number of trucks that you can park in a place like that.
Right. So this is, a nuanced logistics plan where, getting the trucks to come in the appropriate sequence is something that will be paramount in the coordination. And that's something that we're working with our general contractor on, as well as the concrete providers. And so this is part of that plan in terms of how the trucks would access the site, where they would queue, and how they would circulate around the site, which the focus would be on, again, not having them queue on Independence Drive, because that's not permissible per the permit, for one, and two, not something that we feel would be in the interest of the folks that live on Independence Drive. And then as far as circulating the site, making sure that backup noise and opportunities for necessitating backup, or situation necessitating backup, would be minimized and eliminated to the extent possible. So
and the intent is not to have multiple trucks backed up. Obviously, we want to queue it and we want to synchronize the whole activity so they're not.
Right.
We have a 90-minute window, so we're going to be working with the plants to coordinate deliveries and when they leave the plant and when they get to the facility.
Right. That's I can appreciate that. I also have some sense of having run a convoy in the military of 50 or 60 vehicles, that there's a heck of a lot of coordination and it never goes perfectly. And so I appreciate that you're going to be sweating through this. But maybe maybe it would be helpful to go on to my second question, which is why am I correct about the last part of the work being quieter and not involving a lot of heavy vehicles and backup horns, and asking whether you could shift 3 or 4 hours forward?
Well, I think we looked at, I think, a variation of the hours that you're referencing, and I think this speaks to the winter conditions and the goal, a goal tandem to having the trucks come early and load up the concrete pump and then keep the pump full with the trucks coming in sequence, as Ray mentioned, is to have that concrete curing during warmer hours, especially during the winter months. And so you can imagine in the wintertime, when you get to those midday hours, the day is not warm, but certainly warmer than it is during, the earlier evening hours when the temperature starts to drop. And so it's a bit of a dance setting up the concrete, having it cure and spreading it so it achieves the required strength, and in consultation with our project engineer and our contractor and just folks that are more experienced with managing concrete pours of this nature. That's the reason why we are proposing the hours that we are, rather than having the concrete pour later in the day and start later in the day and continue on later in the day, and then having that finished work still taking place during the evening hours.
But I've seen construction sites use heaters in the dead of winter, and honestly, the temperature, there might be a 5 degree or even a 10 degree difference from day to night, but on a cloudy afternoon, you're not going to get much of a temperature gradient between a cloudy midday and 6 p.m. And so,
So we will be.
tell me what the considerations are, and whether, so what I'm looking for here is, I mean, frankly, the 4 a.m. thing, and the 7 times, basically losing 7 nights sleep for people, and the backup horn thing makes me very disinclined to go with this. But shifting it, if it's feasible, I'm looking for a way out for both of us here.
I appreciate that. Ray, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I'll just say we will be heating. We will be using heated blankets to warm the concrete at night, and that'll be happening during the cold weather temperature for sure. So
I guess
most of this is
also
really to avoid the rush hour traffic is what we're trying to get the concrete there as fast as possible and avoid trucks being stuck in 90 minutes and plus and sending concrete back, or putting concrete in place that may need to be broken up with hammers later. It really comes down to beating that rush hour traffic if possible.
Right, but if you've got 70 vehicles to bring in a sequence, some of them certainly at the tail end of that are going to be coming through rush hour traffic. Morning rush hour.
Yeah, some of those tail end, but by then the idea is that if in the event that does happen, the trucks that will have already front loaded the pumps with concrete and the trucks that have already beat the rush hour traffic will be working to keep the pump full. And then if some of those trucks take a little bit longer to get to the site by virtue of encountering morning traffic, it's not as a dramatic issue as having the first round of trucks being delayed, and therefore you're delaying the start of even
the whole thing.
Yeah. In response to your question about shifting the hours, and I appreciate your willingness to be flexible on it and look for solutions, aside from the reasons that Ray and I were just describing. I mean, we looked at initially starting at 2 a.m. and we paused and said, well, that just sounds nuts. No one's going to go for that. When we were talking to the building department, the construction liaison about it, they think they're first, you're going to have your work cut out for you. Forget all of the technical reasons and everything that we've talked about. Starting at 2 a.m. is just bonkers. And we looked at it again and we're able to shave a couple hours off of that, with the idea being that, yes, 4 a.m. is early. There are some folks that are up that early or approaching getting up relatively soon. And I think the idea of starting at 4 a.m. and ending at 11 p.m. versus starting at 7 in the morning, which is still sort of early for some people, but then going well past most people's bedtimes, I don't think that was something that we thought would be a desirable option, especially where we're looking at.
Right. But then I don't want to beat a dead horse here, and there are other people who want to say something, but the perception that I have in listening to you is the work at the back end is quieter and doesn't
Correct.
involve vehicles.
That's correct. So, I mean, there will still be, contractors on site. There needs to be people to operate the equipment, but the more intrusive trucks, the concrete trucks, et cetera, will have been tapering down for some time throughout the afternoon into the evening hours. Then the evening hour work, I can actually bring up sort of like a day in the life of extended work hours, just to kind of give you an idea.
So Mike, we do have two other select board
No,
members. with
I'm
questions.
done. I'm done with this. That's why I said I could see that there are other people who want to talk.
Yeah, so just quickly, you have concrete trucks. Really, setup would be what starting at 4 a.m. So it's the setup for the site, turning on the lights, opening the gates, preparing the site to start work for the day. The trucks wouldn't actually start arriving until 5 a.m. Again, front loading in the earlier morning hours in an effort to beat the morning rush hour traffic. And then you see the trucks taper into the evening hours, and then the winter protection and monitoring, concrete finishing would start in the morning, but would ramp up in the afternoon with the smoothing of the concrete, the use of the whirlybirds, it's not the technical term, but the fans that people use to spread out the concrete and even it out. You might have seen them on other construction sites. That's the work that would be taking place during the later evening hours. And then of course, closing down the site for the evening, making sure everything is what it needs to be for the following day's work, which would not be an early start. We'd be back to normal construction hours the next day.
I'm as done as I can be. All right.
Okay. John, and then Miriam, and then this is a public hearing. I believe Devin has been telling everyone who wants to make a public comment to use the Q&A feature. So if you want to make a public comment, you will have up to 3 minutes unless you have made prior arrangements with the chair. John.
I think Miriam was ahead of me, actually. Is that all right?
Of course.
Yeah. Miriam, you were ahead of me. Oh,
Is she frozen?
She looks frozen. Okay,
Okay.
then I will talk. Well, I'm going to keep this very short because I really do want to hear from the folks who are the neighbors and who are here. But I had one question that just didn't come across clearly to me in the very good account given by the people from the project. There is reference to 7 pours. Does that equate with 7 days, or could a pour take longer than 1 day?
Yes, it's 7 days.
And so that's a locked in, that's guaranteed 7 days, no more, over the period of what, 4 months?
6 months. So we'd have one pour per month on a weekday. 1 in January, February, March, 2 pours in April, and then 1 pour respectively in May and June. And then those longer duration pours are complete. And then in the margins of those pours, it'd be the normal construction hours that we're currently operating with. And then after the completion of those pours, it would be back to business as usual with the normal construction hours.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Miriam, we have you back.
Yes, sorry about that. My internet is working again. Yay. So I was switching off my hotspot. Okay, first, because I love Devin and she's much too nice to say it. Well, she's saying it very nicely in the chat, but I have 2 quick PSAs. Please, we use the chat for technical stuff. So please use the Q&A and not the chat to make comments. Thank you. The second is we just voted on a code of conduct and express civil being civil. So please do keep the comments civil. I saw 1 or 2 that were a little borderline. So let's not make this personal. Okay, so I'm really interested in, I assume he's not here. I didn't see his name, but the construction liaison wrote a 2-page letter and outlined, as you said, a whole bunch of things. So I would love it if he were here. I'd love to hear from him on this. I have then a question and then a proposal. So then my question is I don't understand how 7 days of pours equates to 8 extra months of construction. So you have to do that math for me. Because I don't see where if you don't get these 7 days, we get 8 more months, because to me, that's the tension, right? If we give you the 7 days, construction time goes down, great. But help me out with the math. And I am pretty good at math, so. And then here's my proposal, and this is mostly to the rest of the select board. Could we potentially provide a waiver for the first 2 pours and see how it goes, and see if all the rules are followed and how disruptive it is, and then revisit after that and approve the rest of the pours, or, you know, something like that. So there it is, I'm done.
So I'll help out on some of this. Andy. So the extended 7 to 8 months would basically require us to go back and redesign the entire project. The 7 months is purely the concrete portion of the project that would be delayed. If we could even break up the design currently for this building, all the tendons, all the rebar that's currently been purchased would be basically thrown away at this point. And we'd be starting from scratch. So that's basically, and then that would be the domino effect. So 7 months is probably the best case, but it could be more. So currently have a 30-month project. It would push it out significantly more than that.
It's an issue of coordination, Miriam. So the nature of the structure post-tension, so it requires a lot of upfront coordination for everything that goes above that structure. And so it's the redesign work, if it was even possible, as Ray said, for those concrete pours, you know, the topic of this evening, and then what that does, the rest of the design, the amount of coordination work that would need to take place. And so it's recreating what was effectively, you know, 8 to 10 months of designing the building and creating the construction documents that we currently have, and then redoing those again because we now have a new structure below. And you can imagine the contractors that we have sequenced and their subcontractors that they have lined up to come in and continue the work in the sequence per the schedule that we have outlined. You know, those folks potentially go away. You know, it creates a myriad of issues that are easily avoided by allowing these 7 pours to happen in the sequence that we have them teed up for. So there's a lot of multiplier effects, I guess, to use a mathematic term.
Was that the conclusion of your comments, Miriam? Okay.
I mean,
so
I guess it would
let's,
be interesting to hear what the other select board members think of the compromise, but we can discuss that after we hear public comment.
yeah, we have a number of people signed up for public comments, so let's get to it.
I want to make the board aware there are currently 51 attendees. We have 21 comments in the Q&A, and we have 13 people signed up to speak. The first of which is Danielle Da Silva. You've been promoted to a panelist. Your 3 minutes will begin.
Okay. Hi, my name is Danielle Da Silva. I'm a town meeting member in precinct 16. I also live on Jerry Road in Hancock Village. And first, just to respond to the comment earlier by Jennifer, I can assure you that these emails were actually written by my neighbors, by real human beings who live in Hancock Village, who fear reprisal by attaching their name to this. So they're real, they're genuine people. I've had conversations with many of them, and I also share their opinion. I can actually see the site from my window right out here. Every day I hear the trucks, so I can only imagine how loud those are going to be at 4 a.m. There are hundreds of people, some living literally feet from where these concrete pours are going to be. Almost every family I know here has young children. 4 a.m., 7 days. I want to ask if any of you would like for a giant concrete pour to happen 20 feet away from your bedroom window at 4 a.m. once a month for the remainder of the school year. And I'm going to guess that the answer is no. So I also just want to express that having lived through this construction for a very long time, for the entirety of all of the projects, that I mean, I'm a guidance counselor, so I guess I know this phrase, but I don't do this, but several of my colleagues have those signs that say your poor planning is not my emergency. And I'm sort of starting to feel that in many cases, the project that we've been dealt, the repercussions of which we have felt, in fact, as recently as today, we've had internet outages, we've had water turned off for days at a time. We've had electricity turned off. We've lost heat. It's ongoing. We've had 2 years of blasting when it was really only supposed to be 1 year. It was in locations it wasn't originally supposed to be in. So those of us who have lived here through all of this are not feeling super confident that this is going to go exactly as planned. And also, we were not made aware of this. I don't know where the letters from other residents came from. I only found out about it through town meeting channels, but they wrote their letters before I was even given notice that there was a hearing, which I received at 2 p.m. And so yesterday at 2 p.m. and these looks like the letters were written before then. So I just have a lot of concerns, and I think that it's really unfair for us to bear the continual brunt. We want the project to be done, trust me,
30
but
seconds.
it just feels to me that this is really asking too much, and the sacrifice is on us. We're the ones who have to live with this. And again, there's like thousands of people who live here, and it's really going to have a big impact on our community and on our quality of life. Thank you.
The next person signed up for public comment is Julie Jett. You can unmute and your 3 minutes will begin.
Hi, thank you. My name is Julie Jetty. I'm also a precinct 16 town meeting member. And I'm within close walking distance to Hancock Village, although I am not in a butter. I wanted to share a personal observation, and then I would like to read a letter from a resident of Hancock Village. And my personal observation is that back in September, I did a little volunteering at Hancock Village on behalf of Jewish Family Services, which sponsors a number of asylum seekers who are in several apartments at Hancock Village. And it was interesting when I looked out the window of the apartment that I was cleaning, I basically looked right into the hole that is currently dug for this building, into which this concrete is going to be poured at all hours of the night. And these are folks who really can't speak for themselves. And so I just want the board to be cognizant of some of the folks who are going to be directly impacted by this, people who've already experienced a great deal of trauma in their experience. So, and then I'm going to read this letter, which is anonymous. And to echo what Danielle said, I've been asked to read this specifically because folks do fear reprisals and anticipate reprisals if they make their opinions known. So I think that's something that the board really needs to understand. So to start this letter, we moved to Hancock Village in August of 2019 because it was beautiful and a perfect child-friendly, safe space. Then just 4 months later, we were informed about this huge construction project. None of us were told about the construction at the time we moved in. Our across the street neighbors who had just moved in on Jerry received a notice that they had to move within the month because they were in the way of the construction. Why would CHR rent people an apartment only to tell them they had to move a month later? As a resident of Hancock Village, I feel like I'm an inconvenience to CHR. Like all of us who live here are an inconvenience with our demands for quiet enjoyment, our wish not to be forcibly removed, and to have reliable parking, water service, internet service, and electricity. Now here we are again, the residents, a thorn in their side, saying that 4 a.m. to 7 a.m. is too early to pour concrete. We want to sleep during those hours. Similarly, we are saying that 5 to 11 p.m. is too late to be continuing construction work. The many people who worked from home since COVID, or those with very young children, have been struggling with the noise of construction all day already. Now construction noise will run through every night and every day.
You have 30 seconds.
This honestly sounds like some kind of cruel torture. I'll finish up. Show me one family in the CHR management team who are making this waiver request that would be willing to live abutting this construction project running from 4 a.m. to 11 p.m. I don't believe they would. I don't believe anybody I don't believe anybody would, and therefore none of us current Hancock Village residents should have to live through this insanity either. I call on the select board to reject the request. Thank you.
The next person signed up for comment is Judith Leichner. You've been promoted to a panelist. You can unmute and your 3 minutes will begin.
Hi, Judy Leichner. I live on Beverly Road. I'm a town meeting member in precinct 16. I do not abut the property. I do want to just mention again the proposed truck routes that we all saw. The key is that alternate truck route, and I know that Andy said they're not going to use it, but if it's on that piece of paper, there is that possibility. And the only way to get from Hancock Village from LaGrange Street is down Beverly Road, which, as all you know, has Baker School in the middle of it, and construction vehicles are prohibited. So this map and this plan seem problematic. Second, I know that you also received a number of letters that town meeting members got, and they come from residents of Hancock Village. I'm speaking for some of them because they did not want to appear at this public hearing because, again, they fear repercussions. Here are a few quotes from a few tenants' letter. When I was viewing the apartment, I specifically asked if I would hear construction because I mostly work from home. They assured me that no, I was just overlooking where the construction workers stored their equipment. I found out that's not the case pretty quickly after moving in. Even this, aside from this new proposal to work extended hours, I find myself woken up at 6:30 a.m. most mornings to the sounds of them backing up their trucks, making beep, beep, beep sounds. I share all this because it's so bad already, aside from the exemption they're applying for. A second tenant said, I've been living in Hancock Village for 18 months, and all this time, construction's a never-ending story with noise, dirt, traffic. I'm writing to express my concern about the request from CHR. Currently, we haven't received any mitigation proposals from CHR regarding this project, which doesn't seem to make sense for me. I think CHR should make every effort to minimize the impact, and I appreciate your attention to this matter. Hope you see rejection on their waiver request. And a third letter. For the past few years, working from home during COVID, I've had to run around to different rooms of my house because of the noise. It's an audacity for CHR to ask for an exception to pour concrete with loud trucks from 4 a.m. to 11 p.m. for a project that's not an emergency, but an enhancement. And in fact, was approved and planned since 2015. These tenants are living in a construction zone. The town cannot control whether a landlord rents out units impacted by construction or breaks promises or offers mitigation alongside poor conditions. But the town can control whether construction projects must be completed within the bounds of our regulations that exist to protect the public interest. I'm confused of why this wasn't designed properly in the first place. They know they live in New England and they live in Boston. We have traffic, and it's confusing. Did they always plan for this? Therefore, I urge you not to approve this waiver. Thank you.
The next person signed up for comment is Elisa Jonas. You've been promoted to a panelist. You can unmute, share your video if you're comfortable, and your 3 minutes will begin.
Hi, I'm Elisa Jonas, town meeting member precinct 16, and I live on Russet Road. And first of all, I just want to say I continue to be puzzled by Mr. Martineau's response to Select Board member Ashkenazi as to why some postponement of the concrete pour would result in an 8 to 10 months overall delay. But beyond that, I just want to say I'm fortunate that my house is not in Hancock Village, and it is not even on the side of Russet Road that directly abuts one of the many construction sites. But we, just like literally thousands of other residents, both living in and near Hancock Village, have been long suffering from noise as a result of the massive construction. For over a year, we received almost daily calls warning us of the soon-to-come blast that would shake all our homes, even though the original plan was such blast should only occur for several months. My neighbors directly abutting a construction site lost out on spring and summer fresh air as they kept their windows closed for months to minimize the noise from drilling into pudding stone and then the construction of streets, parking lots, and buildings. Some abutters even chose to move from their homes during the loudest periods, and construction noise is far from done. Now, the town is being asked to grant a permit to drive 70 large trucks through the neighborhood and into Hancock Village, which would make sleep impossible for many neighbors, both on the route and at the site, starting at 4 a.m. ostensibly to avoid freezing concrete during the winter months. Mr. Martineau said that the noise at the site would not begin until 5 a.m., but the noise will occur on the roads much earlier than that, given the 70 trucks that have to arrive. Our noise bylaw states that the select board should consider whether the additional noise will not have an excessive impact on neighboring residents when considering whether to approve a special permit. Given the amount of noise already inflicted on residents over the course of the years of construction, approving this request would add insult to injury, especially when Chestnut Hill Realty could adjust its current plan to begin pouring concrete from the coldest winter month of the year, January, to a time when 4 a.m. starts would no longer be necessary. And as Select Board Member Sandman began to address, what about starting after rush hour traffic? Chestnut Hill Realty has said that the loud noise would be completed by 5 p.m. That could get shifted a few hours later. I also want to note that the bylaw requires the town to make all reasonable efforts to notify all direct abutters prior to the date of the select board meeting at which the issuance of a permit will be heard. To our knowledge, this has not been done. And given that not only direct abutters of the site itself, but also residents who live on the streets used by the 70 trucks to deliver the concrete will have their sleep interrupted. And that Chestnut Hill Realty since Chestnut Hill Realty has not yet detailed the route, or had not yet
You have
detailed
30 seconds.
that they will use, then even if the town were to give notice to affected residents, we didn't even know which residents should be notified. So I ask you to deny this special permit for both substantive and procedural reasons.
The next person signed up for public comment is Nathan Spritz. Your 3 minutes can begin.
Hello, I'm Nathan Spritz. I live on Payson Road and I'm a precinct 16 town meeting member. As you recall, we town meeting members in precinct 16 were staunch advocates for affordable housing in Hancock Village, and I remain committed to one day seeing the affordable units that were initially promised in the application and for the comprehensive permit then finally built. We're getting there. However, this project's design creates such huge obstacles for ordinary construction scheduling and timing that I urge you to take a second and consider the extraordinary waiver request that CHR has placed before you. When one party wants something this big, it's time to have a discussion to figure out the best way forward. In this case, that certainly includes CHR giving something to the town, a good plan for accomplishing this extraordinary work, and the money to fully staff the positions we will need on those days when 60 or 70 or more concrete trucks are rolling across our roads. There are huge challenges outlined in CHR's presentation, but I want to talk the need for mitigation measures that are required because of the massive disruption that their construction methods will bring to the Hancock Village tenants, single-family home abutters, school children, and all of the residents and commuters on our roads between the concrete mixing yards in South Brookline. You already know that they are asking for work to begin at 4 a.m. and end at 11 p.m. on 7 specific days, but there are several other not quite as large concrete pours that we should expect. How do we mitigate the disruptions and the safety issues associated with all of those trucks coming and going? Of course, I don't know the answer to that question, but I have some ideas to start. The easiest may be to avoid cold weather pours by just starting a little bit later in the year. It may not eliminate all late work, but as they cite in their supporting documents, pre-warming prep work and post-placement surface warming activity is necessary in the winter months. It may not be necessary just a couple of months later. Of equal importance, we need to have good plans for the ready-mix trucks to traverse the Brookline streets. There's no getting around extra traffic, but they should be routed only on main roads and have intersections where children need to cross a street for schools manned by police officers. Beverly Road has to be off limits. There's already drop-off and pick-up gridlock, and there are just too many kids walking to school to make any feasible plan safely. But the overall problems remain. How ought we to provide for safety, timing of work, road details, agreed truck routes, pre-work communications, and noise abatement? This is really the work of CHR, their contractors, and the building department. I'm asking you to withhold any waiver or permit tonight, pending them coming back to you with a complete and, in your mind, supportable plan to execute this work. This really is the most concentrated construction work and the biggest potential disruptions, possible safety issues that we have that we've seen in Brookline in my memory. Too few people were timely notified of this meeting to comment, and in my opinion, you were given too small a packet of information for you to play building commissioner tonight and sign off on this request. Please defer any action tonight and ask them to come back in early January with a real plan that minimizes later early work and protects the town from unsafe and disruptive additional truck traffic. Thank you.
The next person signed up for public comment is Carolyn Thal. Your 5 minutes will begin when you're ready.
Thank you. My name is Carolyn Thal. I am also a town meeting member in precinct 16. This whole thing doesn't make sense, which in a way does make sense because we've been saying you can't make this stuff up for the past 10 plus years of dealing with this entity. The unpleasant surprises have been particularly egregious through the past 3 years of active construction. Let's get right to some specifics about this supposedly critical waiver request. We have a memo from an engineer which says concrete pours are, quote, highly impacted by winter conditions. Cold weather plays a significant role, end quote. But Mike Yanovic, the construction consultant employed by the town, wrote to our town meeting member group, I do not believe the weather is much of an issue. That's aside from the fact that the waiver request is for January through June, so cold wouldn't even be a factor for most of that time anyway. The owner's project manager wrote a letter that warns, per ASTM 94, which is accepted building industry guidance, concrete must be poured within 90 minutes of loading at the plant. And he says, the concrete deliveries are at great risk for surpassing the maximum window allowed, 90 minutes, between mixing and discharge. The engineer wrote, per ASTM 94, concrete shall be placed within 90 minutes from mixing. And if trucks are in rush hour and showing up after 90 minutes, we will need to turn them back. However, a simple Google search of ASTM concrete guidance reveals that this supposed 90-minute window requirement, the thing that makes this so urgent, was eliminated 6 months ago. The industry literature is filled with discussions about this change. The regulation was written in 1935, but advances in concrete technology and other factors have apparently rendered the 90-minute window obsolete. 90 minutes might be a cost-cutting preference, but it is not a requirement per ASTM 94. I'm perplexed that this misinformation was presented to us all on an issue of such importance. Maybe they just want to move faster. Maybe they don't want to specify more expensive concrete. I don't know, but I do know that this request is built on weak arguments, poorly made. Perhaps that's metaphorical. The first public record of the Sherman Building proposal is dated December 21st, 2015, 7 years ago. It was approved by our ZBA in 2018, more than 4 years ago. The building permit was issued over a year ago. The design, engineering, and construction plans are not news to anyone. The need for large concrete pours is not a surprise. This is their plan, and it's been their plan for years. Presumably, they didn't ask for a totally outrageous waiver earlier because it's outrageous. Well, regulations exist to protect the public interest. The need for this regulations waiver is unproven by the information presented, and it doesn't make sense given the history of the project or in terms of our obligation to protect the interests of Brookline people. Allowing it would be too impactful on Hancock Village residents and others. It would also set a bad precedent. Select Board, if you go along with this, you're playing right into the game. And the same game will be kicking off soon in a neighborhood near you. If you don't hold the line now, you'll be dealing with this same nonsense for the next however many years after the fun starts in Coolidge Corner. This can happen without a waiver. This is a very skilled team of smart architects, engineers, and construction professionals. They designed a building that was approved and permitted by our town without anyone ever saying they needed to work for 19 hours straight. They will figure it out. I ask you to please say no. Thank you very much for listening.
Next person signed up for comment is Scott Gladstone. Your 3 minutes will begin when you're ready.
Thanks very much. Scott Gladstone, town meeting member, precinct 16. I live on Russet Road and I can see the development out my window, although not this particular part of the development. So in following what Carolyn was saying, I take the engineer's letter at his word. He says a major part of the reason for this request is winter conditions. I would ask that if a waiver were to be given, it would not start until after the end of winter conditions. And if it starts at the end of the winter conditions, I think that they should need to come back and explain if they still need a waiver at all. And if they need a waiver, what would it be like, maybe following the kinds of constraints that Mike Salmon was talking about. I think it's very important that we not allow 70 trucks moving along during both times that the Baker School is commuting, both on the, it should not be both on the coming in and the going out. If they are not in winter conditions, they can start their pours after the first Baker School traffic. And that way they can also have their trucks running more or less after the big rush hour on the highways. Now, the one thing that I'm really happy about is that they've raised this issue of the fact that 60 to 70 trucks are going to be coming through the neighborhood on these days. So even aside from the issue of waivers, which again, as everyone else has been saying, this request should be rejected. So like whether or not there's a modified waiver given, or even if not, just exercising your powers as police commissioners, there's got to be some detail requirements on this traffic. There should be a detail at Route 9 and Lee Street, at Lee Street and Newton Street, at Putterham Circle, at every choke point. And for two reasons. One, for safety, to make sure that the traffic, that the civilian traffic flows, but also at times, maybe they could facilitate the trucks to move. Because I am very concerned that we are going to have, as Mike was saying, a Russian military style convoy, which cannot move as anticipated. And the overflow in front of JP Licks at the market, that's just not going to work. And
You have 30 seconds.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think I've said enough. Thanks very much.
The next person signed up for comment is Stephen Krug. You've been promoted to a panelist. You can unmute and your time will begin.
Hi, I'm not an abutter to this part of the project, but I live on Russet Road, across the street from all the many more months than were originally led to believe, of blasting and nonstop beeping. I have no expectation that the board will deny this exemption at this point because CHR always seems to get what they want. But I can't let the occasion pass without taking the opportunity to comment on how offensive it is to again hear CHR's representatives comment on how they've been sensitive and responsive to the needs of the neighbors and making every effort to mitigate the impact of the work on us, especially since I feel there's been no point in the whole 10-year process where CHR has actually made any concessions. Thank you.
The next person signed up for public comment is Connor Tobin. You can unmute and your 3 minutes will begin.
Hi, everybody. My name is Connor Tobin, and I'm a Hancock Village tenant. I live at 224 Jerry Road, and this is actually a live look at, it looks like site 15 from the map of where the pouring is going to be. This is the active construction zone. Every morning there's backup cameras outside of this window, which is actually in my bedroom, and it wakes myself and my girlfriend up pretty much at 6:30 to 7 on the dot each morning, which I respect and I understand. And when I entered into an agreement with Hancock Village, this was a known thing that my window would have active construction outside of it, and we made the decision to go ahead. But that was with the understanding that the regulations of when noise could happen and when construction could happen would not be changed after we entered into the agreement with Hancock Village to be a tenant of this property. So I urge the committee to vote against this, but appreciate everyone's time.
The next person signed up for public comment is David Canadian. I don't see him any longer, but I'll put him at the end of the list. After that is Cassandra Carpels. You've been promoted to a panelist. You can unmute and your 3 minutes will begin. Hi, Cassandra, are you ready to make your public comment? The next person signed up for public comment is Regina Frawley. You can unmute and share your video if you're comfortable, and your time will begin. Hi, Regina, you've been promoted to a panelist. You can unmute and your 3 minutes will begin. The next person signed up for public comment is Will Varell. You've been promoted to a panelist. You can unmute and share your video if you're comfortable, and your time will begin.
Thank you. My name is William Barrell. I live at 45 Asheville Road. I'm not a direct abutter to this, but I am a butter to the other project that went on for 3 years. I'm also a professional engineer of 30 years in Massachusetts, a structural engineer. And I just want to dispute some of the things that they've claimed. They claim that this could compromise the structure. No good engineer would let cold weather concrete compromise the final structure. There'll be extensive testing of the concrete to make sure that that does not occur. As the name implies, post-tensioning, the structural steel elements will be added post the construction, the concrete curing. So that should not be an issue. I also want to say that, I think this pores that they have is the problem. I think there's a design error here. Our rule of thumb is never to place more than 200 cubic yards at once. They're implying that they're placing up to 700 cubic yards at once. To me, as a structural engineer, that seems not only irresponsible, but unlikely that they're going to be concurrent without construction joints. So I'm not 100% sure I believe everything they've presented here today. I also want to say again that all the promises that have been made by Chestnut Hill to be a good neighbor have not come true. I've been working from home since COVID started, and I have constant noise from 6:30 a.m., as someone said, till 5 o'clock. A tree fell on my fence and their fence 6 months ago. We put in several requests to have it fixed. They haven't fixed their own. We have to look at their broken fence all day, and no one has even attempted to reach out to fix my fence that fell because of their tree. So I don't think there's any reason to approve this. Again, I think it's a design issue. I think it's a design error. And if the engineer won't stand behind his ability to design something properly, he knows the regulations. It's not only the concrete codes, but it's the code of where you're building your structure. And that's on him, and he should start over. Thank you.
The next person signed up for comment is Regina Frawley. You can unmute and your 3 minutes will begin. You can unmute and your 3 minutes will begin.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can.
Can you hear me?
Yes. We can.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
First of all, Hancock Village was promised multiple times that they would notify all the town meeting members of any construction division project going on. I was not notified this time. I'd like to continue with that previous promise. Number two, promises about the timeframes are worthless. Simple as that. We were promised the blasting would be less than a year and a half. It was 2.5 years. Their projections, the seals, the underlay, the geo, the reality is very poor. So they're always saying, "Oh, gee, we need to do more." I don't know why this would be any different, frankly. So I wonder, do they only do this on Saturdays? It's 7 ports. Why can't they restrict Saturday? Yes, they have to get the effect on the residents is more important than their profit margin. Number one. Number two, because we know on Russet Road that they do not keep their promises, even when they don't know the underlying geo reality, they don't keep their promises. It's coming all the time. They never would. So how can we create a fine process? $1,000 a day for each truck. Most of my neighbors actually approve those violations. We approve when they violate, and the town get a nice chunk of money. So I wonder if you could attach whatever you decide to do, attach that kind of fine structure to them. That will be very motivational for them to make sure that the contractors fulfill the main roads that they're going to be on. And I agree with Scott, there should be details at every pressure point there. Absolutely. So thank you.
I want to circle back to Cassandra Carples. If you want to try to unmute again and give your public comment, folks in the Q&A are indicating that residents of Chestnut Hill Realty have lost internet. And that's made some people who have signed up for public comment unable to speak. Cassandra, I see that you're unmuted. Do you want to try talking? Yeah, we can't hear you. So you can either put your comment in the Q&A and someone can read it out loud, or I recommend leaving the audio function, rejoining, and trying to connect with headphones as opposed to just speaking into your phone or your laptop speaker. The next person signed up for public comment is Sophie Magdison. You've been promoted to a panelist. You can unmute and share your video, and your 3 minutes will begin.
Hi, my name is Sophie Magidson. I am currently a resident at Hancock Village, living on Sherman Road. So I actually didn't know about this vote taking place until yesterday at 7 o'clock, when a neighbor of mine informed me. And on that note, I would like to emphasize that Chestnut Hill Realty has done a disappointing job in informing its neighbors of the goings-on relevant to the construction. We moved here earlier this year, and the private backyard that we were told about when we signed our lease is actually a construction site. We do not have a backyard. That was supposedly included in the lease that we spent thousands of dollars on each month. And when there are issues such as turning off the water, losing internet, electricity, it is often not until the effects have taken place that we receive any form of notification from Chestnut Hill Realty that these outages will occur. For the last 2 days, I have had to wake up very early in the morning in order to find a place to work, remotely, because we have not had internet access. And we weren't advised of this. And as somebody who is living right on top of the construction site where all of this work is happening, and who wasn't informed of the impacts that it would have on our living situation on a daily basis, I find it hard to believe that this will have as little of an impact as the design team has suggested. Moreover, from an engineering standpoint, I understand that there is much more harm in doing concrete pours in the cold weather than in warm weather. So I'm also confused as to why the rush would be to start having these pours happen during the cold weather, since there's increased risk for cracking and honeycombing when you pour the concrete in colder temperatures, as opposed to when you pour in temperatures that are warmer. So there are a lot of issues that have been expressed in similar sentiments from concerned residents. And I think it is, as a resident, I believe it is unfair, and I recognize it is not responsibility of the town to make up for the faults and shortcomings of CHR. But I believe that if this notion is to be approved, if the waiver is to be granted, there should be some accountability on behalf of Chestnut Hill Realty to give some sort of compensation to the residents in the
30 seconds,
or some sort of compensation for the impact to living that was not disclosed upon the signing of a lease. So thank you.
The next person signed up for comment is Monique Hartley Brown. You can unmute and share your video if you're comfortable, and your 3 minutes will begin.
Hi, I am not as eloquent as everyone else to express my feelings in regards to, the specifics about construction, etc. But I will say this, I'm here, I have 3 children, and as an oncologist, I need time. When I need my downtime, I need my downtime. And there's been a lot of disruption in terms of the construction already. And it's not just construction issues, it's traffic issues, it's getting in and out. It's multifaceted. So my gist of this, and I really appreciated one of the board members or advisory members kind of pointing this out. This is not just about the noise, but it's also affecting how we get to work every day, how the children will be able to get to school. It is compounding. It's a compounding issue. And so what I would say is it's really, really disruptive to our everyday situation. And I really don't hear anything from CHR that is really being transparent about this process and transparent about acknowledging and noting how it adversely affects the individuals in this community that are living here and having to deal with this on a day-to-day basis. I completely understand this is an expansion, et cetera, but there needs to be a middle ground that is kind of thought about here. And I don't think the families that live here are really being heard in the decisions that are being made in terms of the construction. And so that's really where I stand. I'll say this every day to my patients. I'm like, I can do my best for you, but if I can't think straight because I've had 2 hours of sleep, because I can't function, because outside my door, outside my window, there's construction, and I can't have access to finish my notes or to actually give them their prescriptions or whatever else needs to be done because I can't work remotely. That is disrupting a lot of things. Okay, so that's really what I wanted to say. It compounds ultimately. Thank you.
So I don't understand. I'm sorry. I don't know what's happening, but David, Canadian, I see you in the chat, but I don't see you in the attendee list. So I'm unable to promote you, but you can put your comment in the chat or the Q&A and we can read it out loud. Or you can try and leave the meeting and return. That's up to you. Additionally, I know we had Cassandra Carples who was unable to unmute and make her comment. You're also able to put your comment in the chat or the Q&A and we can go ahead and read that out loud as well. At this time, there are 51 attendees, and there have been no new requests for a public comment.
Thank you, Devin. Let me know if David does make an appearance when he logs back in. And, oh, he says he's back. Can you find him?
I don't know if any other panelists can see David in the attendee list.
No, it's very strange. I'm having the same problem.
Okay. Glad it's not just me. Yeah, David, I would just encourage you to type your comment into the Q&A and we'll read it out loud.
Okay. We'll give him some time to write it out as well as Cassandra. Devin will read it as soon as you send it in the comments section or the Q&A. Any discussion from select board members? I see hands up from John Van Scoyac, Miriam, and then Mike. So who was first? Because I was not paying attention. Miriam?
Miriam.
And I'll keep it short. I can't approve this. I can't approve all 7 at once. I can't listen to all these. I read everything in the packet. I could be convinced to approve 1 or 2 and then see how it goes. And what I like about that is that I think it really incentivizes you to do a really good job with those 1 or 2 times so that we approve the rest. But I can't, there's no way I'd vote for all 7 of these at this point, especially with the issues with the weather, and I just feel like I wouldn't want this for myself or my family. I don't feel like it is necessary. I don't buy the 8-month edition. I just don't. So that's where I sit.
I'm gonna leapfrog over everyone because Chaz has his hand up.
You don't have to leapfrog. It's fine.
Okay. So John and then Mike.
I appreciate all of the comments that we've heard from residents, and I would not want to have to live through what they've had to live through as the neighbors of a very, very significant construction project that has gone on for, as long as anyone can possibly endure it, and even longer. But it is something that was set in motion years ago, approved by the town. The town gets benefits from it in terms of affordable housing. So, I'm not going to recite the whole history of it, but I think we on the select board have a responsibility to hear the complaints, respond as best we can to them, but also stick to what powers we have under the laws granted, under the laws covering this situation, and under the authorities granted to us. And as far as I know, we have the power to decide that only the given hours that are in the bylaw should apply to this. In other words, to say, we're not going to grant you an exemption from the given hours. That doesn't solve the problem of how does a construction project that is this far along get completed. It could get completed possibly within the limits of those hours. The presenters tonight don't seem to think it can be completed within those hours, but let's say it could be. So you have all of the same situations that people are describing tonight. You just have them, in a shorter period of time. It doesn't change the fact that in order to complete this construction project, there's going to have to be a lot of delivery of a lot of cement and a lot of pouring activity. So that's possibility number one. Possibility number two is that, we effectively block the completion of this project. And I don't think that's a road we want to go down. So I think we have to figure out if there's a mitigation that can be offered. I've heard the word mitigation offered by a number of the speakers tonight. What I haven't heard is the representatives of the developer say whether they are open to discussing some mitigations. I would hope that they would be, and I would hope that through the mitigation process, we can reach some sort of satisfactory resolution to what we've been presented with tonight. That's it for my comment.
So Mike, then Chaz, then Devin is going to read the two comments from the folks who had trouble participating.
Thanks. So I would say two things. First of all, I think if the difficulty with granting one or two pours and then sort of seeing what happens is the difficulty is that you then get a building that's 1/7 or 2/7 done. And if we decide that, well, this isn't working, both we and the developer are in a terrible bind. Either they're going to incur some very substantial cost to redesign and perhaps remove, or we're going to be stuck into approving additional pours that when the first two haven't worked out well. So I'm not comfortable with that idea. I do think I'd like to hear from either like John, one of the developers' representatives, either Andy or Mark Levin, about what they think might work as a change in their request, and failing that, I would be interested in making a motion to table this and have them go back and figure out what they could do.
Chaz?
Thank you. One of the things that I'm hearing, first off, I did notice that at the outset there was an offer from the developers and the team to consider additional mitigation requirements as part of issuing a special permit. So given the tenor of the conversation and the kind of theme that I've been hearing from a lot of the residents, sounds like one of the common themes is an issue of lack of notice. That when, in general, when construction issues that impact the broader community, such as increased traffic or outages of a utility happen, that there is in the expression of the people who have come to speak tonight. It's only post hoc notice. Right now, the town's representative has recommended 8 different mitigation measures, which range from a logistics plan, which I think addresses some of these concerns, notification to the town's designee, clear direction on parking, a contact number for the town to be able to address issues, a virtual meeting with abutters prior to the first pour. But I wonder if in addition to that, one of the things that they may consider in terms of mitigation is notice to the residents who may be impacted. And I realize that's a broad swath, but I think given the broad nature of this project, that it's appropriate that if there are any construction related activities that they believe may result in the degradation or loss of services, such as any utility, that at least 48 hours advance notice be provided. That's one option that may be able to provide at least some comfort to the issue, that one of the issues that we've been hearing kind of repeated over and over again.
Great. Devin, can you read the 2 comments?
Cassandra Carples writes, I am a current resident. I began living here prior to the construction, continuously affected by the construction. This week alone, we have lost internet, a utility HV does not provide, that we as residents seek out and pay outside of rent. I woke up multiple days in a row, including weeks, because my home was shaking due to the drilling. And just tonight, I came home to a fire hydrant gushing onto the road tonight. HV does not care about residents at all. I called and asked to be compensated for living through this construction, and I was told they would terminate my lease and I could move in the middle of the pandemic. I live on the path where these turns would be traveling through, and I would continue to be impacted by this without compensation. David Eichmanian writes, I live at 238 Jerry Road, closer than most of the residents living at the property. So if anyone would have an issue with this, it would be me. I can't understand how anyone at the property would be against getting this project completing ASAP. I don't know if anyone actually read what I sent in this morning, but I'm sure all the residents on Jerry Road have been enjoying the brand new walkways that CHR has done. I'm sure they love the newly paved road. I'm sure they love the larger, more spacious parking spaces, all of which are part of CHR's improvements to the property. I've lived through all the blast security lights into my bedroom, parking being taken by construction, etc. Obviously, there are inconveniences, but they haven't been major problems. I'm for the waiver. Thank you.
Bernard?
Yeah, I was trying to think of, what I wanted to say. There are a lot of comments related to how Hancock Village treats its tenants. And I think we have to be careful with those because, the question is, what power do we have over that other than to penalize Hancock Village by not approving this waiver? And that's probably not a good idea. I'd like to, get some better sense from Hancock Village of, what other mitigation ideas they have to address some of the issues of the residents, both of Hancock Village and surrounding areas. However, the main issue here is that there is no way that everyone is going to be satisfied with the construction project, whether it's at Hancock Village or some other community. And our job is not to try to solve all the problems, but come up with a good way of reducing some of the harms that a construction project causes to neighbors without destroying the project itself or delaying it to the extent that we're really shooting ourselves in the foot. So that's my comment.
Thank you, Bernard. I will say, when it comes to a noise bylaw waiver, I've used a litmus test of how much of it is in the public interest. So we've done noise bylaw waivers for our own construction, the high school, for example. But I think reputation does matter when it comes to asking the town for something. So that being said, I would love to hear from Chestnut Hill Realty. I understand that Mark Levin might have something to offer.
Yeah, listen, I'd like to thank all of you. We've been working really hard for a number of years, and the good news is we're coming down the home stretch, and that although Pudding Stone has a ways to go, all the projects we've completed are behind us, ostensibly. And many eggs were broken in the process, but that's the nature of construction and development. I appreciate some of your ideas, and we would be willing, in fact, to change the hours. We tried to do it in what we thought was the best, but we would modify the hours so that we would do the quiet setup at 6. We could do that and start at 7. That would mean doing the quiet work until 1 a.m. And perhaps that would, address the early morning disruption. As far as mitigations go, I just want to say that during the blasting at Pudding Stone and to some degree at the residents of South Brookline, but definitely at Pudding Stone because more units were impacted during blasting. We emptied out all the units that immediately abut the blast site. So a couple of people elected to stay. We gave them discounts, but 95% of people in those units were vacated. After the blasting was completed, we occupied those at deep discounts with the knowledge of all concerned that they would be abutting construction. And so those incentives, if you will, are in place and will remain so. As far as additional mitigations, we're open to that. We need to get this project behind us. It's to everybody's benefit, from the residents to the neighborhood to the town. And so from the standpoint of notifications, additional, traffic control, in addition to, we would give, hotel stays if anybody in those immediately abutting units would like to not be there during those 7 days, or even look at the ones who were immediately impacted, and we would give a rent waiver for the day that we are impacted. So we're open to ideas. This is really important. Everybody wants us to be done. And so we're really open to any of these mitigations that were mentioned.
And I would add to that, Mark, reporting requirements. I know over the past few years in the conversations that I've had with town staff, particularly from the planning department, they want to know in advance before something's going to happen, and they want to know after the fact if there are potential issues that came up. They want to know so they can respond accordingly when inevitably they get calls or questions from folks, and that's something that we would look to be to maintain here as part of this request and amplify and expand upon as needed, based on the feeling of the board and the staff involved. So communication is very, very important.
So we had the public hearing. I will close the public hearing. What do select board members think about this new proposal? Miriam?
So I could get behind rent waivers and hotel stays. I guess I would feel more comfortable with that in writing and with an outline of exactly which units would qualify, right? I want it to be applied equally to all of those who could potentially be affected by this. But I really would like to hear from the other select board members, because like Mike, I'm not an engineer, so hearing from Mike, his opinion and doing more, that was very valuable for me. So, but I feel like this idea of, again, compensating these folks is a way to think about this.
John has his hand up.
Yeah, I think we're talking about two different sets of waivers, as I understand it. We had a town proposed set, excuse me, not waivers, excuse me, mitigations. We had a town proposed set of mitigations, which I believe I heard the developer's representative say they are ready to accept. So let's assume we add those mitigations that are in writing, that were proposed by the town. And then the additional mitigation, which has been brought up, is hotel stays or I think, rent, some sort of rent break, I guess, that would be equivalent to a hotel stay, I assume. There's a question of timing here. If we wait until the next select board meeting to get those mitigations specified and added to the other mitigations, is that going to meet the needs of the development team? Not that that is, the only consideration here, but there's not much point in saying we would agree to them if in fact we're going to screw it up by the fact that I think it's 3 weeks until our next select board meeting.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
I think we need a signal from the development team as to whether waiting until the next select board meeting to approve this with mitigations agreed to would be satisfactory to all parties.
The next select board meeting is January 10th, just so you know.
Ray, would that be, could we fit that into the schedule?
I think we could, but ideally we'd love to get a vote today. I mean, we'd be holding quite a bit of work until then, but we could make it work.
And the board, so we've, as John said, we have several conditions, mitigating conditions outlined per the consultant's memo. We're committed to the items that Mark just outlined. The board could condition the request that we submit an acceptable mitigation plan to the building department for review prior to a certain date as a way to keep things moving forward and to not lose that 3 weeks to a month's time.
I'll be surprised if you get it tonight. Just saying, from where I sit.
Just a suggestion.
Which one, Mike or Bernard had their hand up first?
Bernard.
Okay, Bernard.
Yeah, I guess, my concern is we need to get this project on track. I think the idea, and, we'd have to work out the details of this, of conditioning our approval on the building commissioner getting in writing and finalizing a set of mitigation plans along the lines that select board members and others have indicated is the way to go. I mean, I guess they could wait until January 10th. I think that's maybe playing with fire. So I'm not sure that's a great idea, but I'm not the engineer here. And if they think they can do it, maybe that's the way to get the votes. But I would go for approving tonight, conditional on a mitigation plan that the building commissioner approves.
Mike?
Thank you, Heather. I was going to say, echoing Miriam, I think. I'd love to see, or I must see, in order to do anything further, a mitigation plan in writing and the change in hours in writing. I have to say, I'm inclined to say I'd like to see some penalties if if the hours are not kept, the expanded hours are not kept. So January 10th is not that far away. I'm very much in favor of asking for a revised proposal, and I will not vote to approve tonight.
Ms. Gilbert.
Thank you. No, I was going to just add to Bernard's comment that perhaps the approval could be subject to both the building commissioner and Mr. Carey's review to make sure that all the conditions we've discussed are incorporated. And of course, the vote would be for the hours also that were discussed. So there'd be no change in that. And then all of the conditions that were discussed would be subject to the review and approval of the town administrator and the building commissioner. So that was my only comment, just following up on what Bernard said.
Great. Chaz?
Yeah, I think I agree with the broader team here, just as a matter of practice, that we should negotiate this before conditionally approving it. Let's make sure we have all our ducks in a row. Let's make sure that there are no breaking issues. Let's have staff be actively involved in this process, and let's make sure that it gets done in a way that harmonizes the need for this expedited process to move forward with the needs of the broader community around it. So we'll work closely with the developer and with the community to make sure that there's a set of conditions in place that are clear and enforceable when it comes back to you on the 10th.
Thank you. I am still pretty uncomfortable with everything that I heard from residents and even the counter proposal that I've heard. I'm just not convinced that issuing this bylaw waiver is truly in the public's interest. So maybe my mind will be changed in those 3 weeks. So I really appreciate the presentation and the information, and the select board will take it under advisement.
Thank you so much. We'll be back on the 10th.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Happy holidays.
You too. Moving on to warrant article public hearing. For those that may not be aware, the select board decided to call a special town meeting so that we can present to town meeting the adoption of the new stretch energy code. I'm trying to buy time to see whether or not we have our state rep with us. I don't see him. Anybody else have any more information to present?
I can talk a little bit about what the specialized code does and what the what the kind of big takeaways are, just in the abstract.
Great, thank you, Chaz.
Okay, so since 2009, Massachusetts has had the stretch energy code, which is an opt-in energy code that allows localities to have a more energy efficient requirement for new buildings or significant renovations. Recently, the legislature has passed a law that allows for another level of energy code, which they are calling the specialized energy code. Some people jokingly refer to it as the super stretch energy code because it operates under the same principle, right? And a locality can opt into it. The state changes and revises it as it goes forward, and the locality is bound by that for as long as it adopts it. So it's you vote in, but you don't have to keep voting yourself in over and over again. Once you voted in, you're in until you vote yourself out. And the aim of this specialized energy code is a net zero state by 2050. And in practice, what this means is it's a recognition on behalf of the Commonwealth that there are still buildings that are being built today that will require fossil fuel energy in order to be functional, and that there are needs that involve housing in particular that will involve what the Specialized Energy Code calls mixed use. And so there is an option in this Specialized Energy Code for mixed use housing that involves the use of fossil fuels that is not net zero. But the caveat to that is for smaller structures, there must be the optionality for those structures to be converted into electric only or entirely passive energy or some other sort of ultimate net zero structure. And for larger structures, particularly multifamily housing, there must be mitigation measures sufficient to bring them close enough to make them net zero, such as they must be equipable by solar panels. They must have electric hookups for all of their appliances. They must do what is necessary to get as close to net zero as possible, even though when being constructed, they may still use fossil fuel developed technology in order to power them. This process is maintained by the state. They intend to update it at least every 5 years with that goal of net zero by 2050. It is not the same thing as the 10 towns, the so-called 10 towns law, which is more closely modeled after Brookline's proposed home rule petition. That one is an even more stringent energy code that the state is allowing 10 communities that demonstrate the ability to carry out, to use as a sort of pilot program. We don't have the regs for that yet. We're not likely to have the regs for that for a long time. This is something that happened prior to that, which is just another step towards a net zero energy community. And the aim there is that unlike the stretch code, which I think incentivizes a net zero mindset, but doesn't set a target date, the specialized code really does say to builders and renovators, look, the aim here is net zero by 2050, and it's going to take aggressive steps to get there. So communities that adopt this are adopting that sort of mindset, which is we are going to get to net zero by 2050, and we're going to take aggressive steps to get there.
Great. Any questions on behalf of select board members? We spent a great deal talking about this at our budget summit on Thursday. And we will talk about it in length at town meeting on the 10th of January. I don't see any hands raised. This is a public hearing. So if any members of the public wish to make a comment about this proposal for town meeting to consider adopting the new stretch energy code.
At this time, there are 23 attendees. No one has used the hand raise or Q&A feature to indicate they'd like to make a comment.
So I will close the public hearing on warrant article number 1. Any further discussion before I move favorable action? Seeing none, I move favorable action on warrant article 1 for the special town meeting to be held on January 10th, virtually. All those in favor? Bernard?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Miriam?
Aye.
Mike? You can use the space bar.
All I have to do is click on the microphone if I remember that I put it on. Aye, thank you.
And the chair votes aye. Moving on to warrant article number 2.
I'm so sorry, Chair Hamilton. Melissa just texted me with an important update here. We are moving to amend the warrant article 1 just with the language that is specifically required by DOER. We're clarifying the insertion. So what you should be moving here is the motion is the amended language,
Okay.
and not the original. Sorry about that.
Let's take the vote over.
That's what we all understood, wasn't it?
Well,
Just for the avoidance of
just
doubt.
abundance of caution.
Mm.
So the vote is on the amended language that was provided by DOER on the stretch code.
Is it different from what's in the packet or is it the same?
We'll check it very quickly. It is slightly different than what's in the packet. It's amended language. I'll make sure that it goes out to the broader board, but there's no substantive change to what it is, which is adopting the language that DOER requires. It's just actually putting the DOER language in the warrant article.
I can pull it up if it just so that you see it in front of you. If you can just give me a minute.
Great, thank you, Melissa.
Yep.
But again, this is the language that we need to notify DOER in order to take advantage of this. So it behooves us to use the language that they provided to us that they need to hear from us.
Of course.
Okay, I've got it. So this is the vote here. This is the language provided by DOER. Bernard, I'll email this to you so you have it as well.
Okay. Yeah, I think we need to know exactly what we're asking town meeting to pass because we will be asked.
Mhm. Okay, so let's try this again. I will move favorable action on the amended language that incorporates what DOER needs from us for the adoption of the stretch energy code. All those in favor? Bernard,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Miriam,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Thank you very much for making sure that we were dotting our i's and crossing our t's. So the next warrant article, Mike, do you want to say a few words about that? This is a
Right.
public hearing.
Yes. So the next article is in response to concerns that people express that when they receive the summary from the state Secretary of State on that describes referenda. There's this very good description of what the referendum would do, and the pros and cons are in there a bit. And I think most people appreciate that. But when you have a local referendum, it's not on the state ballot, then there's nothing. And in fact, some people went to the ballot booth, went to the voting booth this last time, looking at the fire station referendum, which was a significant debt exclusion, and had no idea, what they were doing. And so this would let the town clerk emulate what the Secretary of State does, but emulate it for local referenda. And it's something that is allowed under state law. It's simply a matter of our opting to allow the town clerk to do that.
Great, thank you. Well said. This is a public hearing. I understand we have at least one member of the public who would like to speak.
First person signed up to comment is Richard Murphy. You've been promoted to a panelist. You can unmute and share your video if you're comfortable, and your 3 minutes will begin.
Good evening. Richard Murphy, town meeting member, precinct 16. And I find this warrant article is long overdue as far as assisting all residents of all walks of life, and would want to emphasize that in a measure like this, that obviously we cover all the language barriers which are involved in this, and that our regular citizens who go to the voting booth have a clear understanding and a clear message as far as what they are voting on. It's just transparency, government being transparent, and we hope that you support this measure. Thank you.
At this time, there are 19 attendees. No one has used the hand raise or Q&A feature to indicate they'd like to make a comment.
So I will close the public hearing. I have to agree that this is long overdue. I didn't even realize that we had the option. And I think it's important now more than ever, one, with the loss of the Brookline tab, which was a source of voter information. And, I've been racking my brain, how can a town like Brookline not have adopted this before? And I think, in my opinion, it may be a result of the fact that it was always expected that the select board would launch a campaign in addition to the other volunteer responsibilities that we do. And in the last couple of years, we've kind of backed off from that. So I think it's very important to allow town staff to be able to answer questions. Now, it's a tricky thing. The person who ran this idea past me said, "Oh, it's not going to be controversial at all." Anything that we write down will be controversial, even the most neutral sentence. But I do think that this, on the whole, is better having than not having it. So I'm proud to have the select board sponsor this before town meeting. Any other comments from select board members? Okay, let's move the language. I move favorable action on warrant article 2 for the special town meeting to be held virtually on January 10th. All those in favor? Bernard?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Miriam?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. And I thought we were close to being done, but now we have Newbury.
Is that a cue for someone?
Waiting for someone to be promoted.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, David.
Chaz, why don't you just start?
Yeah, I think you continue to have two interrelated but distinct questions about Newbury before you. One of which is in your packet, is the charge for the long-term use committee, and one of which is, during the pendency of that committee's work, is there some short-term use that you would like to use that campus for? The obvious ask that's before you is from the Public Schools of Brookline regarding the Pierce School renovation or reconstruction. So I think in this instance, it really is up to the broader board in terms of your appetite for the tenor of discussion this evening. You could discuss both short-term and long-term. You could discuss the long-term charge and table the short-term discussion. Although I know we've promoted both Mr. Perlman and Dr. Guillory because we want to make sure we're conscious of their deadlines. Or you could discuss both, but vote on neither.
Lots of options. I do like options. I would like to hear from our planning director. But I would love to hear from other select board members about what their appetite is tonight. Oh, sorry. I had it on the wrong thing. Bernard.
Yeah, this has been percolating around town for the last, couple years. I think we need to move on the Newbury Uses Committee charge tonight. It's taken a long time. There've been a lot of delays. Some, expected, as well as some that I just don't think can be justified. But I think we need to at least move on that. Chaz did give a pretty good description of some of the issues with the school use of the Newbury site. I'm not sure that I've had time to really digest that, but we could have a discussion that sort of fills out some of my concerns. So.
Okay. John?
Thank you very much. And thank you, Bernard, for that comment. I hope that the other select board members noted that Chaz sent out the school department's answers to a series of questions that I had sought answers to. But we didn't really get them until this afternoon. I wouldn't blame anybody if they didn't have a chance to go through the material. The material is extensive, and I'm speaking strictly to the question of right now of whether we should vote on the short-term use. And in fact, the materials that were sent to us as select board members have not been reviewed in an open public meeting of the school committee. So much as we might want to look at those materials and answer, how do these answers to questions make us feel about the question of assigning Newbury to school department use? That's all well and good, but until we know how the school committee has responded to these very same questions and answers, and what their choice is, I just don't see how we are ready to vote tonight on the short-term use. I want to find out what the school committee votes to do after they've had a chance to review the information that came as a result of the questions that I asked. And then I want to have a select board discussion, and maybe we'll agree with the school committee's view of this, and maybe we won't, but at least we'll know where the school committee is coming from on this. So I don't want to leapfrog the school committee on the short-term use. And very quickly on the long-term use, this issue had not occurred to me before, but it was brought to my attention in a phone call from someone who is, well placed to have concerns on this question. If we are going to assign Newbury to school department use, and keep in mind, this would be for the next 4 to 5 years that we would be assigning Newbury to school department use, it would be a waste of the attention and the resources of the planning department, not to mention a waste of some valuable volunteer time, if we were then to also have people work for 4 to 5 years studying an alternative to school department use of that property, when after 5 years of school department use of the property, we might find that's what we want to, that we want to keep that use in place, or the school department asks us to keep that use in place. And we have other things that need some focus. And the big one is Chestnut Hill West, Boylston Street corridor. And I know that there are people who strongly feel that we would be better advised to not focus on Newbury use for the next 5 years, but to use our resources, both volunteer and staff, to focus on Chestnut Hill West. And so I think we need to hear that case well made before we make that decision. And thank you for listening.
Mike?
I think we'd be, we have the chair of the school committee here, we have the superintendent. At least let's ask some questions about the short-term use so that we get somewhere with this. It's almost 9 o'clock, and honestly, I don't think we're going to be able to do much else tonight. So I would be happy to have a discussion, even if we don't have a vote on the short-term use.
So I would love to hear from David Perlman as to how the school committee is thinking about this property. I will just say that, I've been on the select board for a while, and I don't know of too many other uses besides the building department that has been using the property ever since we acquired it. It's always been a challenge to get anything to move in there in the short term. So if this can save us money with the ongoing school projects that we know we have in the next couple of years, I, for one, am very supportive of that. But David, how does the rest of your committee feel?
That essentially encapsulates, Heather, where the school committee position currently stands. That being said, it is accurate what John said, that this data from this recent round of survey results was provided to school committee members today as well. We have not yet had a school committee meeting in which we've been able to discuss that data because it is so recent. We are scheduled to address the survey and its results at our January 5th meeting. However, our default position remains that we would like to use Newbury as temporary swing space for Pierce School.
I'd love to hear from Kara Bruton, our Director of Planning. I will say this about Boylston West. Newbury is something that we control and own, and we've kind of been kicking it around for a while. I mean, how much longer are we really going to kick this can down the road? I'm all for, development. We need the taxes. But one thing we absolutely control, the other thing we incentivize because we don't control the property. But Kara, how do you feel?
I think I'm still listening. We are happy to go whichever way the select board would like. Chestnut Hill certainly is an opportunity for us to see significant commercial tax growth, which may not be as likely at the Newbury site. We do have staff that are ready to go on either or both simultaneously. But given the length of time it's taken us to hire the third ED/LP person that will hopefully start in January, there would probably be Victor working on both if we wanted to do those in parallel. I hear John's point about, why start a committee now if the deadline is kind of dragged out over 5 years. I did see in the version of the charge that Chaz sent around a deadline to report back by the end of 2023. So there is at least a timeline in the charge. Yeah, that's all I can think of to help guide you here.
Okay, thank you. Miriam?
Thank you. So I'm like you, Heather. I'm inclined to get this property in use, and this seems like a good use of it. And when I have spoken to Pierce parents, and I have spoken to quite a few Pierce parents at this point, their biggest concern was actually busing. And I told them busing is in there. That their children will be bused. They will not have to figure out how to drive their child to Newbury. So my question then is this a vote you need from us tonight, or is this something we can come back and vote on after the school committee has had a chance to discuss the survey results? Just because I think it would be, if it can wait, it probably would be better for the school committee to discuss it and vote and then bring it back to us. But if it can't wait, I will vote in favor of it.
There would not be a huge difference between a vote tonight and a vote, say, a week after January 5th. We certainly have the expectation that we're going to need to use that space. That is the plan. However, a difference of 2 weeks is not going to change very much.
Great. John? You're muted, John.
Thank you, Heather. Excuse me. And just a couple of things. I would hope that David would just specify in his next comment, when he says, we are interested in using in Newbury. Is he referring to a vote that's been taken by the school committee? I'm not sure what the we is. But putting that aside, I would like to just draw to the attention of my colleagues on the select board. This wasn't just about this Newbury survey, or this Pierce survey, excuse me, which, by the way, began with a statement that the decision has been made to use Newbury. Now, what do you think about it? It didn't survey Pierce parents as to how they would feel about Newbury versus, say, using Driscoll or using other spare spaces in other schools to relieve or to meet the needs for swing space during the period of Pierce construction. So it's the survey, but it is also, to Miriam's point, it's information about the busing costs, which, excuse me, is described in two options. And one is busing for everyone, and one is busing for those who meet the criteria for busing that is the existing criteria in the school department set of criteria for who qualifies to be bused and who doesn't. And the first option, which is everyone can have can use a bus, it comes to a cost of $1.788 million. The second one comes to a cost of $357,000. So there's something to discuss. And as I say, on the question of the survey itself, not actually including any mention of using Driscoll spaces, the information that was provided by the school department in answer to the questions that I asked it includes considerable information about the number of classrooms that will be available once Driscoll is completed versus the enrollment at the school. And it includes considerable information, which might come as news to some people, about the timetable for the completion and the move in on Driscoll, plus the demolition of the old Driscoll school, and the creation of the new Driscoll playground. That timetable and the Pierce timetable, which actually doesn't start until 2024. So there's a lot in there, and I hope my colleagues will have a chance to look at it thoroughly.
Okay. If you don't need a vote from us, then maybe we should postpone this. I will just say I have heard a lot of concern from Fisher Hill residents about the possible traffic and busing. So we, of course, would love to see the plan. How many kids, how many buses per day? We just encountered that with a noise bylaw waiver earlier this evening. Not sure if you were around for that. So people have lots of opinions about noise. But I would love to see this property used for something of public value and to get us out of leasing space. So let us know. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on. Moving on to our second to last order of. Oh, do we have to vote the charge? We have to vote the charge.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. So the motion is approving the charge of Newbury Planning Committee. Any further comment?
I do
Seeing
just want
none.
to flag in terms of deadlines. I think the deadline for the community engagement process is the end of next year, and then the deadline for the actual proposal is 2024. So gives the committee a little extra time.
Okay. All those in favor? Oh, Bernard, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I did. Sorry, it took a while for me to get that hand raised thing. So there's a budget in here, and I assume that the balance in the account for the Newbury for this committee is $20,000, with $16,000 having already been spent for the icon study. And then there's $15,000 for a community engagement consultant, which seems pretty high. And I'd like to get some sense of, what is it we're looking for from a community engagement consultant that is going to cost that much?
I think,
or tell me that that's not a high cost. I don't know.
yeah, we found to get the community engagement level that we got with the housing production plan cost significant funding. And so we're trying to be realistic about what that kind of level of cost is. This is in some ways a much smaller project than the housing production plan, but we know that there is interest townwide as well as neighborhood specific amongst different interest groups. So this is why I'm anticipating that we need to have a line item to do community engagement in a serious, structured way with a consultant on board that can have the one-on-one meetings. But what I'd like to do is have the committee get started, and after they talk about the scope a little bit more, come back to you as we figure out and work with Melissa Goff where we might be able to find funding and how we would move this project forward.
Any other comments from select board members? I am very much interested in trying to figure out how we balance this with Chestnut Hill West. So I will talk to the town administrator to see, capacity, but don't want to leave money on the table. John?
Yeah, given my earlier comment, I'm just curious, does voting the charge tonight then, set in motion a process that will go on for 3 years, even if during those 3 years, the property will already have been committed to school use?
So as we said in one of our previous meetings about this topic, I think the schools, if they use it for Pierce, that puts it out at least 2 or 3 years. Because if the ballot question passes in May, based on my other experience with debt exclusion projects, it's at least 3 years until the building is constructed. That is a significant amount of time. I actually think that that's to our advantage, because whenever we have tried to start a study committee and we only have a year, it inevitably asks for more time, and it usually ends up being at least 2 years. So I think it's prudent to issue the charge. It's going to take some time to figure out who the right people should be on this committee, and then they're not rushed.
May I just specify one more thing, because I feel like I didn't make a very good presentation of the concern that was raised to me in a phone call. And I think the best committee to make that presentation to the select board, if we have the time to hear them, is the Economic Development and Advisory Board, EDAB, as to whether they might want to make the case for a focus on Chestnut Hill West at this time.
Maybe my mind wandered. What does one have to do with the other?
The case that I think they would make is that it would be best to focus the energies of the planning department and of our volunteers on the Chestnut Hill West question, rather than dividing the attention of the planning department and of our volunteers between that and Fisher Hill, if Fisher Hill is already going to be tied up for 5 years. And it truly is, from today, it's more like 5 years that Fisher Hill would be tied up by the school process.
I don't disagree that it may be up to 5 years. I guess I just see them as separate efforts. I will call on Chaz in a moment. Where one of the things that we talked about at our budget summit is putting more resources into the planning department, so that it's not an either or scenario, but a yes and. Chaz, do you have anything to add?
No, that was the point that I wanted to bring into the conversation, is that there is another kind of interlocking political question here, which is there support in the town for increasing the planning department's budget such that it becomes a both and situation?
Because the people that I anticipate recruiting for the Fisher Hill space would be completely different than the Boylston West. So we're not pulling from the same pool of volunteers necessarily. But yes, there would be some overlap. But part of the long runway is to then be able to focus on something for a while, then focus on something else for a while, be able to ramp up the additional resources that hopefully the voters will approve in May, so that we can walk and chew gum at the same time. Bernard?
Yeah, I just want to emphasize that, people have been waiting around for this committee to get going for a while. There are tons of ideas that people have and expect to be addressed by the select board at some point. And these ideas are not all of the same type. Housing versus a pool, recreation versus some other school use. So, it's plenty of work for the committee to do. And, if it's 5 years, that time, that is not time that we're going to be twiddling our thumbs. There's just so many aspects to this that have to be addressed that I don't think that we should be waiting. So
Okay. So reminder, mostly for me, that we have a charge before us that needs our vote. How are we feeling? Should I just call the roll and see what happens? Okay, let's do that. So I move approval of the charge that is outlined in our packet regarding the Newbury half campus. All those in favor? Bernard?
Aye.
John?
And to be clear, I have no problem with the charge, but I've already made clear, I do have some questions about the sequencing, but we'll just leave those aside for now.
Okay. Miriam?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And
Okay.
hopefully we'll have a slate of members. That's a question I have for you. Is that Bernard Green and you, Chair, that will bring back a slate to the select board?
We can certainly do that.
Or whatever you'd like, just so that I can work with the right people.
Yeah.
Okay.
We need to put the word out, and it's already out, that people interested should file applications through our website.
Yes, and Devin and I spoke about this earlier. We're going to do an open call, make sure we get the word out, and we will also tomorrow, Victor will send an email out to everybody that we have heard from that has been interested over the last several months, and ask them to send in an application as well.
Great. Bernard and I will work together and we'll come up with a slate.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Bernard. Okay, committees of 7. That has been one of my favorite experiences. Do we have Tony? So committees of 7 are usually put together when a debt exclusion passes and a new building is being constructed. The committee of 7 interviews design firms and then makes a recommendation.
Thank you for that explanation. I had no idea.
So usually a select board member is appointed and they chair it. And then it's, I think, 3 members of the building commission, and then the sponsoring agency, usually it's been the schools. So usually a school committee member, but in this case, it is the fire department because they are fire stations. And I think the locker room is for the police department. So it'll be the police department and then a few other members. Do we have anybody presenting on behalf of the town?
Sorry, Chair Hamilton, I don't see Commissioner Bennett or Tony on the line.
Okay,
I can cover this one if you'd like.
thank you, Melissa.
Sure. These building committees are major capital projects per the bylaw for the building commission. And so the usually it's members of the using agency and then members of the building commission. And then the select board rounds out the membership as the 7th member. So for the fire station projects, we have Chief Sullivan, Patty Kripe, and Dave Randolph, who are representing the using agency. And then we have the building commission memberships, Karen Berleski, George Cole, and Nathan Peck. And I believe select board member, Chair Hamilton, you were going to be designating, I think yourself.
Yes, although I think somebody else is supposed to move it. Any takers?
I can move it.
Okay, Miriam moves that that the chair is the select board representative for the fire station projects.
Indeed, I do.
Great.
Second.
Thank you, John. So, all those in favor of adopting that committee of 7 for the fire station project, please say aye. Bernard?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Miriam?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. The next one, Melissa, do you just kind of want to describe the nature of
Sure.
that project?
The next is for the locker renovation project across the street at the public safety building, essentially making some better accommodations for the female police officers. And so the representatives of the using agency would be Deputy Superintendent Mike Murphy, Derek Hayes, and then Sergeant Cheryl Malloy. The representatives of the building commission would be Janet Fearman, George Cole, and Nathan Peck. I believe that the suggested select board member is Miriam.
Yes, I made that suggestion and I will move that.
Oh, can I just ask what the time commitment, like, I've never done anything like this.
It's usually 2, maybe 3 hours. It really depends on how many firms are interviewed. I think you'll enjoy it.
Well,
It's
I
a
think
small project. It's $450,000, so it's not a huge time ask for this particular one.
right. I mean, I do think it's important to have a because I'm a woman, and it is a women's locker room. I do think that matters.
Yeah.
So, all right.
It's not a huge lift. It's very interesting, but it does require focused time on reading proposals that come in and being able to critique them.
I think I can manage that.
Yeah.
It's also really nice to interact with the building commission because we seldom do. So it's nice to actually like meet with another board that does stuff in town.
I just want to warn Miriam that this also involves a drainage issue. So you're
Oh,
gonna
well,
have to
drainage, I know. I mean, I do know a thing or two about building toilets, so.
Yeah, you're gonna have to become an expert on drainage. So,
I am an expert on drainage.
oh, that's good.
Excellent. Then you are the right person for this.
No, probably not
position.
this kind of drainage. I mean, I know how to drain a field hospital.
Nasal drainage.
Yeah, no, I did that too, but I used to do part of my humanitarian response was water sanitation and hygiene. So.
Of course it was.
So I know how to build drainage around a field hospital. I'm not so sure about a women's locker room, but.
Tomato, tomato.
Yeah.
So all those in favor of the names that Melissa outlined for this capital project, including Miriam for the select board representative, please say aye. Bernard?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Miriam?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Now, the last order of business was to be board and commission appointments. However, we have received another application, so we'll be postponing that to another meeting. So that is the conclusion of our business for the last meeting in 2022. And we will see you a couple hours before special town meeting on the 10th.
Okay. At the risk of creating controversy in this country, I wish everybody a great holiday.
Merry New
Whatever you
Year.
celebrate.
Personally, I take umbrage at that. I much prefer to say Merry Christmas.
Well,
I want you all to know I took a break to light the Hanukkah candles. There you go.
There you go. Oh, we did that earlier, right?
Okay.
Happy holidays, everybody.
And
Uh,
healthy, yes.